Jim Burke went
15.
over
We're
it
still on 15.
and said
Right.
that to defer to the inspector on what he said with the 115 and the extra 4 feet and all of that. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I think we were just talking about the active.
Oh, the whole thing in general? Okay.
The active passive distinction.
Okay. All right. So are you going to move on?
So
to-
there was a CO on the property.
Yep.
Yes.
for-
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
Yes.
just for the record, you want to open the meeting, and
So-
it's after 6, you want to open the meeting.
Well, we start at
What-
We
6:30.
do the hearing
Yeah,
at 6:30. We
yeah.
tend to pre-discuss
Yeah.
Yeah.
a little,
All
just
of
go
it.
over the applications, approval
Do you do that on-
minutes.
Do you do that on the record?
We-
There's
We
no
typically
record take.
don't do
No
any-
record.
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I got confused with.
It's all good.
It was like, aren't we
Yeah.
supposed to start at 6:30?
Well,
But-
do we want to just
I just had a question about this.
truncate the initial work session and
Yeah,
then?
Yeah, we
Which-
can, but I just have a few
which-
questions here. So on 15, right, setbacks originally allowed for the previous garage that was on the CO for the property. So did we get a copy of that CO as?
There
okay.
is a CO, yeah.
Let's take a look. Oh, here it is. Thanks.
Yeah, that's existing. This
Mhm.
was the previous survey here showing it with the dimensions and
Got
setbacks
it.
and everything that, this is the new one with the roof over that they added.
Okay. And this is the garage here.
That's the garage
Back
here.
in, yeah, 1996, when
So
the
now
CO
the-
was issued, right?
Right, so before you say anything, there's an extra 4 feet added
Yeah.
here
On this side.
on this
Yeah.
side.
Gotcha.
So the whole question was adding
Mhm.
the extra 4 feet.
No, it's on this side.
No.
No,
so
it's
that's
here.
the shed roof.
The shed roof
Gotcha.
comes out here.
So-
The extra 4 feet comes
But
out here of the,
passive use portion of the structure, which
Is
I don't think
over
the
here.
code no, the passive use portion of the
Mhm.
structure is a larger footprint now.
No, this is 18.3, this is 18,
No,
this is
no,
20. This is 20. Okay, I see, 20.
Yeah,
Ah.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so.
4
exactly.
feet
Yeah, yeah,
longer, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And then we also have this roof here,
Correct.
right? Okay, understood. And the CO doesn't really specify at the time, just detached garage.
CO is
Detached
CO is
garage.
pretty big.
Yeah, and this is back in 1990 something?
96,
Yeah.
yeah, September of 96. This was, yeah, so this probably went with this when they got this.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's around the same exact one. All right.
Yeah. Sorry, I also have the code for non-compliant buildings.
Thanks.
so
Yep,
just
and that was
for
in
any
this,
reference.
yeah.
Yeah,
perfect.
just,
Why is she referencing this?
Because this is what I was
Non-compliant
trying,
building.
it's a non-compliant building. But,
Mhm.
so when he added
Mhm.
4 feet here,
Mhm. It deviates.
there was, yes, from what the original
Mhm.
footprint was.
Mhm.
But it was, the inspector
Mhm.
was the one who said, yeah, it doesn't make any difference there.
That's good. He thought it would be passive, right?
Yeah, and then we went to Jim Burke, and he agreed. So in his, ultimately, it's the building inspector's authority to interpret code and determine, and he determined that it didn't make any difference, the
Mhm.
4 feet.
Right.
So
So
that's
then we're
what she
really
was
just seeing
saying.
on that, correct?
So we're really
Well,
only looking
so
at this.
The question is, now, so imagine for a second if this thing extended the
Mhm.
entire
Yeah,
length
yeah,
of the
sure,
property,
sure.
all of a sudden there'd be a lot more stuff close to the property line. So is that an increase of the nonconformance? Debatable.
Mhm.
They determine not because the proximity of the structure to the property line
changed.
the side has
Changed,
not
sure.
changed, exactly. It's
Yeah.
the side yard setback hasn't modified.
Hasn't changed.
It's a little bit of a judgment call. I wish the code were clearer on this,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
Well,
they're
does-
not
So
asking,
really-
they're not asking for that variance, are they?
No.
No,
No.
right.
'Cause
So
it
then
doesn't matter if
that's-
it's in-
They
then that's
determined
not
they didn't
before
need
us.
it.
It
No.
doesn't
Okay.
matter if it's an inch
But
or
we
if
thought
it's.
before you guys
Sure.
brought it up.
Yeah,
that
no,
the
no, no,
answer
yeah.
to
No,
the
but that's
question.
good, because we're not being asked that question.
No, we're
as a
being
board.
asked
So
this.
ask this.
Correct.
Yes.
And that gets into the use question, which is what we were discussing when
Yeah,
at the
so
beginning.
Now, this was never there in the prior version.
No, he added, what happened
Mhm.
was he added
Mhm.
a wall here. If you have the pictures,
Yep.
I saw you had them out
Yep.
before. So
Would you
this,
be willing to
here,
hold up
bring it.
the
Here.
portion about active accessory structures?
So this wall was added, and that is a problem. So these are back-to-back garage.
The
This is
definition.
the neighbor's house. He's complaining because this was added, and he doesn't like the wall and the fact that the roof sticks out a little further.
Mhm.
You can see it.
Mhm.
There was a new picture, but it's not here. Taken from the rear.
But it-
Up on the screen.
Oh, you do? See it?
Mhm.
So the roof sticks out a little bit, so
Yep, I see
it's
it,
like
yep.
you could either
I
make
see from
him.
the back, so you got the back
You
side.
could either make him move the wall 3 feet. He's saying that his view.
Of what?
Well, exactly, unless you're looking in your neighbor's roof.
Oh, sky.
But that's the back of his house.
No, I know, but if you're down on the ground and a building's there, it's not about the view at something, it's about a view of the sky.
But it's not,
It's
they're
like-
level.
Is it just a,
level.
is it just a wall?
They're
or
level.
is it?
No,
Yeah,
it's just a wall.
just a wall, right?
He probably wanted privacy from his backyard neighbor too, so that
Right.
when he sits here to read his paper or
Right.
whatever,
Yep,
he's
makes
not
sense.
looking at.
Well, we'll hear about all that.
Yeah.
My question is just around the interpretation of active-passive, and it does,
So what
it
is it?
just, so here, active accessory structure. Uses that occupy a structure in a manner that exceeds storage such as a pool house.
Yeah, so-
Occupy.
Well, it's more than.
Well, you
no,
do occupy when you're sitting there, right?
No,
But do you
I think
occupy a
it-
pergola?
Yes.
I would say so, yeah.
Maybe, but.
No, I think occupy means like you're living in, and it's living space. That's the
A
way I would.
structure in a manner that exceeds storage such as a pool house, studio, office, workshop, playroom, or game room. Nothing in there about unenclosed spaces.
Yeah, those are.
I really feel like an exterior covered but not enclosed space is accidentally getting looped into the intent of the
Yes.
active accessory structure.
I don't think it's because you're not living
Well, look
in
at
there.
read
it's not-
passive, read passive, storage uses such as garden hoses, tool sheds, and garage.
Right,
I mean,
well,
you-
no,
you're
but that
not-
obviously can,
Yeah.
but the
You know-
problem is that structure can
Right.
mean any assemblage of materials. The definition of structure is really vague, and it includes retaining walls, hot
Yeah.
tubs, pergolas, right? A lot of things that aren't enclosed space, right? So now an active accessory structure, I guess, is any of those things that can be used or
No.
occupied.
I mean, you're not living in a
Because you
game
could
room
sit
either,
in your
but,
garage, would that make it suddenly an
If you were
active?
using it recreationally, yeah. I mean.
But no, I'm just saying he's
You
gonna sit outside. You could sit in your
All right,
garage, I mean, that wouldn't make
That we'll have a
it.
discussion, but I think that's where the crux of whether this is even
Mhm.
or either that or the building department has made its interpretation and they're here for a variance.
They're here for a variance, not on the use, but on the fact that this wall
Yeah.
is 2 feet, is 2 feet short of what it should be. You know, they put the, this is the problem, the wall here is, this wall is put up and it's 3 feet from the property line when it should be 5 feet. That's
No,
what
no,
the.
no, no. This wall is 3 feet from the property line.
No,
Oh,
this-
that's 3
That you
feet.
can't, because that's
Yeah, yeah.
CO'd.
So this is, but this
the
is
problem.
7. There's a bigger setback there, so
Mhm.
this meets the 5-foot setback required of a passive accessory
Right, but
structure.
you need 10.
But it doesn't meet the 10-foot
It's-
setback of an active accessory structure. My problem is if we call this an active accessory structure, then
Yep.
the whole thing is an active accessory
Right.
structure.
Mm.
Because it's this one structure.
Well,
Yeah, it's
my
an upper turn
questions-
to it, absolutely,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I don't think
My
that's okay.
questions to him is, how are you using this? Are you planning, is there plumbing? Are you planning on
No, that's,
enclosing it?
that's
Are you
passive,
planning-
and this is an exterior shed roof. I don't think this is an
I
active
agree.
accessory
I agree.
structure.
I think if you say it's not active, then therefore it doesn't require the 10.
It does, because it's short 3 feet here.
No, because it's not an active
Not an active. If
accessory
you say it's
structure.
not active, then it doesn't require
So
the
what
10.
is-
Then
so-
you only need 5.
Then you only need 5 for an
So then
accessory,
they
for
shouldn't
a
even be
passive
here.
accessory
If we
structure.
deem this not to be active.
Can we do that? Because we've been told to apply to give a variance for an active
It
accessory.
Because
says
we-
right here that it has a separate classification from the garage structure itself.
Okay, so
So-
now they're saying,
So they're just calling it
Says-
two structures.
we're here because of this wall,
Okay.
right? That was my understanding, we're here for the roof overhang for the wall. They're saying that because it's 3 feet short of what the code says. Andrew is saying that if this is determined to be active, right?
Then we need 10 feet.
Then we need 10 feet and they need a variance. If it's passive, it's not living space, then he
Right.
doesn't need to be here. So we're here
Do we
actually to
have
say
that
if it's.
discretion, or are we simply being asked the question of a variance?
From what I understood, he told the building for the building.
sit
inspector.
underneath
Once
it,
you say
have his
that,
coffee
now
and-
that means
But
it's
the
active.
building inspector has interpreted,
But you could sit in your garage and read the paper.
It's
and
not
it's-
intended for that. This is built intended to occupy underneath. If he gives us a letter that says, never mind, I want to put my garbage cans underneath it, then he can retract his, application to the ZBA and not be here. But because he said that he wants to occupy it, he wants to hang out underneath it, that makes it active
So-
use.
Even if it has no plumbing or anything
no,
like
even if
that.
it's not enclosed, it's not the plumbing that worries me, it's the enclosure.
Enclosure.
This isn't, like, if this were, again, I go back to the active accessory structure was created in order to create an opportunity with a little bit more stringent requirements for people to use outbuildings in more active ways. It wasn't intended, I don't think, to make it harder to make a pergola where you would have been able to make a pergola before. This-
Also,
right?
if the code is unclear, then the runner goes to the,
Well, but we haven't been asked to interpret the code here, we've been asked to grant or not grant a variance.
but we're asked to decide whether or not that's considered active or passive.
No, we're asked
No,
to grant a variance
yeah.
for a passive structure. They've made the interpretation.
Right.
He
They've-
said what he said, the building
An active
inspector
structure,
determined
yeah.
what the
They've
building
ex-
inspector
right.
determined.
They've
and they sent it to
expanded their
us
scope.
For a variance.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think architecturally, internally, that there would be storage of accessible from the inside up here if I wanted to slide
No.
some? Okay.
Doesn't look like it
I
at
wish
all.
there was.
But because it's active use, he does have.
So
you
it still
guys were
comes down to the same thing, that if it's active use, we have to grant a
Right, well,
variance
the
for that.
problem is whether we are empowered at this point to determine whether it's appropriate that they're here or just answer yes or no to
Right.
the question that we've been asked.
Can we actually reshape the application to ask and determine as a threshold matter
You guys have the
classification?
power to
See what I mean?
interpret.
It's a threshold, because the use is not
Well-
area, you see what I
Right,
mean?
it's- in
So
other words-
so we have to decide whether or not, because it's
Yeah.
not enclosed, whether it's active or passive.
Right, and I'm reading into the intent of the law, and that's why I'm questioning the ambiguity of the word occupy and the number of options, and the number of examples that they've listed up there for active.
So just remind me, when we make a decision, they are going to issue a certificate
Look at
of
the
zoning,
CO.
a certificate of zoning compliant.
Mhm.
A
Certificate of
No,
occupancy.
a variance.
Sure. Yeah, but
And then
it's.
a CO.
And then a CO. So now, could we say, yes, CO granted, and the CO to read for sitting and sipping coffee?
Yes.
It would probably be
It would say
specific
active
in this
structure.
sense.
Right.
By putting, because that's just, the use just a single family residence
Right.
with detached garage. So it probably would read
And covered.
that detached garage with active covering or something like that to show that that was an active use. We would probably try and do that. We can make sure that does happen if that's a condition that you want.
Yeah.
That is noted specifically that the active use is only allowed underneath it.
Sure. Now, what if now we
That's
grant that,
the thing that-
what if we grant that they remove that fixed roof and they put a mechanical awning?
They wouldn't need, I don't even think that they would need to be here, like,
See that?
retractable. That's.
I guess the point is
Imagine-
I guess the point is you're allowed to sit in your yard as close to the property line as you'd like to. That's kind of what's
I agree.
getting me here. It feels like the intent of the active, it's getting caught up in the active accessory, the letter of the law, maybe, of the active accessory use code. And that doesn't feel appropriate in this
Me
case.
too, I
It's his
agree.
yard.
It's his yard and it's
Yeah.
just an overhang. It's not like if it was
It's not-
enclosed, I would,
Technically,
I don't know why
it does
they're
get
here.
granted though for accessory use, not that he will, not that he has any intention, not that he's ever said this, but because active uses have more, leeway with what they can retrofit with. So not that you can, because that's a very small, thin wall that you
Mhm.
put up against the rear property line, but if he decides to put a water line in there, put a
Well,
wet
that-
sink, he can.
But we're only
But
approving
if
that.
it was,
Go ahead.
well, I'm just saying you're approving it, also when you're approving it, you're approving that, yes, it is an accessory use.
What, the 4-foot overhang or the
Right,
entire
and
structure?
the way you're saying, just for the fall.
Yeah.
If
I'm
we-
saying in that wall.
If we
he
approve the
could-
variance as written.
Right,
Correct.
that's what I'm
Also-
saying.
But also, you're allowed to have a sink or a hose bib in your
Oh,
yard.
no, that's what I'm saying.
Or a fountain or
I'm just saying,
anything.
because
Yeah.
you're saying that it seems more like a passive use.
No, I'm saying it
Right.
seems more like a not,
it's getting caught up with the active.
Have the attorney,
yeah.
you want to talk to him, reach out to him, you want to ask him a specific
You know,
question.
well, I really think it's a matter of threshold we're being
Um,
asked.
Can we, instead of drilling down into the interpretation of the code, no, this was not the attorney that made the interpretation, right?
Yeah, so Billy.
This is, can we just ask the question as to whether we're allowed to reinterpret the question that's being asked of us?
As a threshold. whether we
If we
determine.
disagree with the code determination that the building inspector made that sent us a variance in the first place, what are our options? Can we ask that question?
What was your question? If-
We're being asked,
We're
to-
objecting to the premise of the variance
Yes.
being asked.
the application is,
On whether it's active or passive?
yes,
Yes.
that's what we need to determine.
But we haven't been asked whether it's active or
That's,
passive.
that
We've
should have been,
told it's active.
that should have been the
And we're
application.
saying, I don't think so.
Interpretation if it's active or passive.
That's what should have been the first,
Or
right.
if it falls under the definition of, I mean, obviously sitting under
And
there
if
is an
yes,
active
and
use, but it's
if
it's-
yes, then how do you
Is
analyze?
is an
This is what
unenclosed
I-
space able to be considered an active
Well, so
structure?
that's what it looks like now, but I'm not sure, because I didn't speak to the homeowner myself.
Look at this.
Does he plan to pave it? Does he
That was
plan
one
to-
of the
Which
questions I was gonna ask. Are
I
you
don't
ever
know.
planning on paving it? Are you planning on adding plumbing, all that?
Door,
Yeah.
What do you say?
Thank you.
door,
Window.
activity.
Well, no, you wanna
Do
get into
garages
your
have-
So, you
shed,
put it here.
garages should get in. No, come on.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you, but now it becomes active. See?
He didn't respond to it.
Now it becomes
So
active.
just-
Now it becomes active.
I see, so.
Well, no,
we're going
Well, no,
speaker.
because it's a garage
Actually, you
storage
wanna take it that
space.
way, then.
I do want to take it away because the door's here and cover
Sure,
here,
thank you, I
you see?
appreciate it.
So how does that make it active? What do you
Because
think?
now you have activity,
No, no.
Oh, you're
activity-
walking into your garage.
right?
You're allowed
It's
to
not
walk
activity.
into a storage space. You're
Yeah,
allowed to
you
walk
don't have
into
to
a
walk
garage.
into it.
And, but the purpose of this is to promote your active.
No,
Okay,
he said the
listen.
purpose is to sit there underneath it. That's what he
We
is.
can't start judging architectural details of passive structures as to whether somebody intends for them to be slightly less passive. We have to
Yeah.
go by what they're saying, and if they violate what they said, then they're using a passive structure actively without permission. But that's not our.
Are you there?
purview.
Okay, I'm gonna put you on speaker.
So it says the variance is hearing is only in regards to the roof over the extension of the home.
All right, Jim, can you hear us?
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jim.
I can hear you.
Hi, Jim.
Promise is not gonna make fun of me, is he?
Yeah,
No, no,
he's
no.
not here at the moment.
No,
You're
no,
lucky.
it's Andrew, Antonio, Tracy, and Dan. We have four.
Oh, hey guys. Hey Tracy, how are
But
you?
we
Good,
are
Jim.
we
How
are
are you?
streaming as well, so just so
Yeah.
you know.
We ju-
Okay.
We just have a quick question for you. The application on 115 this evening is asking for a variance, asking for an area variance. That's how the application's framed, but there is an interpretational threshold question that arises through us analyzing this, and we feel that maybe the application is not framed accordingly.
There was a determination made at the building department that this shed roof of a covered exterior space qualifies as an active accessory structure. And we're questioning that because it's unenclosed space, whether that's really the intent of the code. Based upon the logical reasoning that in the past, before the creation of the active accessory structure code, you would have been able to build covered accessory structure pertaining to the regular accessory structure setbacks of 5 feet. And that it doesn't seem as if the intent of creating this 10-foot active accessory structure, for which they give a whole host of examples that include all enclosed program, right, that was meant to loop in one of these sort of covered exterior type spaces, which albeit may have active use underneath if you're barbecuing or sitting or whatever, but is really essentially a covered portion of yard. Do you see the ambiguity we're getting at, first of all?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard without the same, but, so, the prior use, you're saying, they're trying to like legalize a non-conforming use, is that what?
There was an addition put onto the side of a passive garage, which
Right.
is being called, the passive garage was too close to the property line by a couple feet, but that's moot because it's legal non-conforming. It's a rebuild of a burn down, that's irrelevant. When they rebuilt it, they put a shed roof off the side which covers a portion of the yard which the applicant says is going to be used for sitting. Thereby, the building department interpreted it as an active use. Now, that shed doesn't go to 3 feet of the property line. It goes to 7 feet of the property line. But in the code, the active accessory use structures require 10 feet of the property line. But that, to our interpretation, I don't want to speak for everybody in the group, but my interpretation say the intent of that code was to allow you know, for people to have a game room or a, you know, pool house or something like that, a non-sleeping but occupied space other than a shed or a garage or storage, right? But it set a slightly more stringent setback requirement from the property line. But all of those things in my mind are meant to be enclosed structures, and this is just a covered portion of yard, basically.
It's only two sides are closed.
Yeah.
The other two sides are open.
And so it feels more like, essentially,
Almost like
if this is true, and this is considered an active use, then the pergola 5 feet from the property line that you would have been able to build before the creation of the active accessory use structure would no longer be allowed to be built 5 feet from the property line. It would it would only be allowed 10 feet from the property line. And that doesn't feel like making that more stringent requirement was the intent of that code when it was passed. I don't want to read into intent too much, but it feels like
When you look
they
at
meant
the,
interior space.
when you
with
look
that.
at the examples, it doesn't
Yeah.
seem to
And
go with it.
here's what I'm thinking. I think that the application is not going through the procedural questions of first saying, am I active or am I passive?
in other words,
And
we-
if so,
Yeah.
then tell me if I am active, can I get away with the 7 feet when I need 10?
Right, we
But
could have
if
been
you
asked for a
determine
code
that-
interpretation.
Right, if you determine I am not active, then I don't need to be here. Thank you very much for that
Right,
determination.
but the question is, we were not sent that question. We were sent
Right.
the question for a setback variance for an
Right.
active use structure. How are we empowered to handle this?
Right, because
That's
in
the
order to
question.
answer that, we almost have to go through that analysis of, wait, am I active
Which
or am I
which we
passive?
weren't asked.
Right, which we weren't
The
asked.
active has a more severe, stricter requirement. for
Right.
setback.
Yes.
10 feet, 10 feet.
Yes.
Not that familiar with those terms, active and passive.
Well,
I can read you the code if you'd like.
yeah, we have it here.
It's essentially, active is not enclosed, is that pretty much?
Well,
what you're
it doesn't say anything about enclosure or this question would be resolved. It says uses that occupy, that word is the closest we get, a structure in a manner that exceeds storage such as a pool house, studio, office, woodworking shop, playroom, or game room, period. Not included in this definition are structures for the housing of fowl, horses, equine, livestock, yada, yada, yada.
That seems pretty clear to me.
Okay, but now read passive.
But I mean, where does a pergola fit in that, is my question. Does a covered
Look at
exterior
passive.
space?
Look at
So,
passive.
passive says storage uses such as garden houses, tool sheds, and garage.
So is it being used for storage?
Right.
So,
If it is,
yeah.
it's
Clearly,
not,
like
it's not.
your typical garden shed or whatever.
well,
It was a garage.
I guess accessory structure is an assemblage of any material, so but the definitions of active and passive only seem to include enclosed occupiable space. So, I don't know.
I think we need to hold over the application and have him resubmit the
Or-
application to ask,
or-
first off, as a threshold, am I active or passive?
Or are we allowed to offer a code interpretation where none was requested, instead, in lieu of a variance consideration?
In lieu of a variance consideration. Yeah, and what did the building inspector, obviously, what was the referral to the board?
Right,
They sent us a request for an area variance for a setback for an active accessory use structure.
So they consider, the building department considered it an active.
Right.
Yes, that the variance sign is an extension, if you want to read that. That was his,
The
Hold on.
the variance hearing tonight is only in regards to a roof overextension the homeowner is adding to the south of the garage, but in speaking with the ZBA chairman, so that's just in regard to that portion, yeah.
yeah, that's
Uh,
all
hold
he's
on.
saying it is in
Yeah.
regard to.
When in doubt, hold them out.
I think we
but
can-
what
we can
for?
hear it, I don't know why, like,
Do we need to?
in other words, like, we can hear the details, and you might just decide to approve the variance based on what you've heard, regardless if it's active or
Right,
passive.
let's
So
at least
just
have,
hear it.
have the hearing and hold it open and request further clarification from the building department in the meantime, and then if we need
If
to.
necessary, yeah.
If we need to, the next hearing, people could come back and speak to whatever new information is on the
Right.
table
I
if
mean,
we hold it
you
open.
might
Is
decide that even regardless if this is
That
active or not.
sounds fair, that sounds like a fair way to proceed if you want to do that, I think that's a fair thing. to do.
Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, in general, as you know, I mean, pretty much if the building inspector makes the interpretation, then, of course, you can agree or disagree.
Yeah, we're just not sure what to do if we disagree. If we were explicitly asked for our opinion as an interpretation, then we'd know what to do.
I think
but-
he should be on the record then.
Oh, I think he is, but,
I think he should be on the record.
all right.
Who?
Well,
Jim?
let's,
The building
Oh,
inspector,
the building
as to
inspector.
what he, why he, right? And we should be getting a amicus opinion from building. We should, into the record.
Why don't we just hear it and then we can go from
yeah,
there?
we'll continue this conversation afterwards. All right, thank you, thank you.
I think that's fair. Here it then. We can get a clarification.
We're already, what
Yeah,
time?
we're
Let's
over.
go.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
gotta do without that. All right.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time, appreciate it.
Okay, sure. No
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Should we take it with Mike's stage or we leave it? We have a long-
Take it. No, we. Okay, 112, anything? No? Good?
We got open this hearing. It's 6:40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6:45.
We could do whatever we want.
I suppose.
We could sit here for 6 hours if you want.
Open up there.
Yeah, let's go.
Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. We have two matters on tonight. The first matter is 115 Arlington Avenue, appeal number ZB 0006-24, Suffolk County Tax Map 206-0011-002-006. Zoning is the RB2 Residential District. Property owner is Michael Colucci, the applicant is Michael Colucci, and the contact is Michael Colucci. Description, existing covered patio requires a variance. Public hearing. Pursuant to the Village Code, Section 250-28C, subsection 4, the applicant requests a variance for an active existing accessory building built 7.5 feet from the rear property line when 10 feet is required. Is the applicant or his representative here tonight? Do you want to come up and state your case? You have to get sworn in first, please.
Is that mic live?
Oh, sorry, this is the first time I have one of these things, sorry.
And can you just raise your hand for me?
Sure.
Do you swear to testify about the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you?
Yes.
Can I just have your name?
Michael Colucci, yeah.
Have all the mailings and stuff been done on this?
Yes.
They have, and has, you have a copy of the staff report?
Yes, I do.
You do. Okay. Off
Okay.
you go.
So, hi, I'm Michael Colucci. I just wanted to give a little context to the whole situation here. So, as I've heard mentioned, the previous garage that I had burned down in a fire roughly 2 years ago. Thankfully, no one was hurt. And our wonderful volunteer firefighters, some of which left their high school graduation, came to put out the flames. So that was really something I appreciated. So I filed the building permit last year to tear down and rebuild a new garage, since the old structure had been too damaged to salvage and was built over 90 years ago. So it wasn't up to today's codes, so it was better to just start new. When rebuilding, I decided to rebuild on the old foundation, but to add a covered porch area off to the side. I was told when I submitted the proposed plans to the building department that the area being added had to now be compliant with the modern requirements, and we're not grandfathered in like the rest of the structure, which I was told at the time required a 5-foot setback. I spoke with the building inspector, and we determined that if I pushed the overhang in roughly 2 feet from the back of the rest of the garage, then that would comply with the 5-foot overhang requirement, and that would be compliant. It was in this condition that the permit was approved, and then we pushed back the overhang around 5 feet to bring it to a total of around 7.5 from the property line to leave room for that 5-foot setback. It wasn't until after the permit was approved and the construction had already been in process that I was, oh, sorry. It wasn't until the permit was approved and the construction had already been in process that I was told the setback requirement was actually 10 feet. After some discussion with the building department, they acknowledged that they misclassified either the active or passive use. I guess as you were talking about it, it's a little bit ambiguous in the definition. Everything else has been closed on the garage, including the framing inspections, electrical, et cetera. And this is the last step that I had to obtaining the CO. So I was hoping to just get this 2.5-foot allowance for the variance.
Okay. What, you built that wall
Yes.
in the back. What was the purpose of the wall?
Privacy screening from the property line.
From the back neighbor, or just?
Yeah.
So that's the only reason you put that wall up?
Right.
Do you have any plans to finish, like, the floor underneath the overhang?
Not at the moment. Probably, if anything, just some stones to sit, like you mentioned, sitting under it just to hang out.
Like pavers or something
Yeah,
like that?
something like that.
And is there lighting or electric or?
There's lighting on the side of the garage near the door and in front. As far as electrical, there's, I believe, 2 outlets in that space. Let's see, actually. Yeah, there's the one here, and then there's another one forward by the exterior door.
Is there any plumbing in here?
No.
Is there any intention of using it ever as living space? Like-
No.
Like turning it into an accessory apartment or anything
No.
like that? Would you be opposed to moving the wall to be in compliance?
So I would, because the garage is obviously already existing, so that would come at a massive expense to try to tear down and rebuild in place, especially seeing as I was told in the beginning when I applied for the permit that would be compliant, and it wasn't until afterwards that I was told that it actually had to be 10 feet as opposed to the 5.
Okay. Is there any questions from the
Yeah,
board?
from the interior where the overhang is that interior portion accessible from inside? Would you be able to store some type of containers or whatnot in that
in the
roof
roof
area
section.
from the inside? Yeah.
I'm sorry, this part
Yes,
here? Or
from the inside of the structure.
the actual roof line is all closed in.
Gotcha.
Just like regular soffitting.
Gotcha. Do you consider your use here active or passive?
So I guess that's something that everyone's kind of trying to figure out. Based on the other examples, when I had applied, I didn't consider it active, hence the confusion, which is why we pushed it in only 7.5 rather than 10 feet. However, the building inspector had, I guess, made an issue of that, which is why the final inspection was, I guess, not approved because of that requirement.
So you considered it passive?
Yeah, well, when I read the code, I considered it as part of the garage,
Yeah.
and therefore I thought that would also apply, especially because it's not an enclosed space with
And-
plumbing and similar things.
My question is along the same lines. When you had that initial conversation with them, I understand the permit was granted and
Mhm.
then the variance was asked for, which is not usually the order of
No.
operations.
Right.
So can you, I think we'll be curious to see the filing documents and what they say, but do you also recollect any conversation? Did the building inspector ask what the space was for, and did you state or write on the application what that covered space was for?
I don't believe I wrote explicitly what it was for, but the initial plans were actually such that this rear wall was in line with the back of the garage, And
Got it.
that's when we had the discussion that we'd agreed to move it forward.
And what did the plans call the covered space? Just exterior
Just
covered space?
Covered, yeah, covered space or covered
Okay,
patio.
and the question was never asked at that time?
For the use, no.
Okay. And so it came up later because of a conversation after it had been built, is the
Yes.
timeline? Okay.
Yes, once it was while it was mostly built, that's when they had come to, I guess, let me know that the requirement was 10 feet, just I guess as a reminder, I'm not quite sure. But that was when it was made known to me that the requirement was 10 feet.
So you just did, so your whole purpose of building this was so that you could sit out underneath it?
Yeah, like a covered porch area, somewhere just to sit in the yard.
Okay.
And what will the garage be used for?
Storage,
Storage.
yeah. Tools and things.
Any other questions?
No.
Hearing none, seeing none. I'll open it up to the people here. Gerard Gang?
Yes, Gerard Gang, 110 Jane Avenue. My home sits directly behind the applicant that's applying for this variance. Our garages are approximately 6 feet apart, back to back, as you can see in the pictures. I want to begin this conversation with saying that there was a past event which my wife, Patty, and myself were sitting in our screen porch, which is attached to our garage, and suddenly I heard pop, pop, pop. We continued eating, and minutes later saw extreme smoke and flames coming from the garage of Michael Kalachi's. As good neighbors, we immediately went into action, and Patty called the fire department, and I began using a garden hose to put out the fire, as well as protecting my own garage. This put my own safety at risk to help out a neighbor. I come before you with the knowledge of many of the village codes as I co-chair the Architectural Review Committee. Village codes are put in place to protect our residents and this village. Many people feel codes are annoying, harassing, detrimental to residents, developers, and retailers. Great thought and time is spent in creating and implementing these codes. I understand that the permit was granted to Michael Colucci to replace the garage with the addition of the portico area under the stipulation that the survey be presented showing the property line and that the portico needs, by code, to be 10 feet from the property line. Before the construction began, the landscape privacy screening was removed. This enabled me to watch and carefully document the build. In conversations with Mr. Veraskis and Mr. Redfield from Building and Planning, I was informed of this process. As the building continued, I continued my correspondence with both gentlemen via emails and also including photographs. They both visited the site as the construction began and continued to give updates to my questioning of the process. Both gentlemen continued to assure me that the survey needed to be presented to continue the build, and if necessary, any element of the build would have to be within code and be taken down if necessary. As my correspondence continued via these emails and photos, I began to ask them if the survey was submitted. Continually, I was told no, and I began to ask for additional help from Mr. Freeling to address this issue. The portico was clearly not 10 feet from the property line, as I can determine from my own property. I addressed all three gentlemen why a stop work order was not given to the resident. This went on for several weeks of me asking until I was told that a stop work order would be supplied to the resident. The portico continued to be built, and I watched the siding and trim work being completed. Once again, I questioned whether a survey was supplied and was told no. My backyard has been directly impacted by this bill. Most of the other neighbors don't see any of what I see. We have lost our airflow to our porch and have to look at this wall created by a portico, which is directly behind my sitting area in the yard. Even the elevation and the angle of this portico's roof could have been addressed to have a more consideration to us as neighbors to ease the visual and physical obstruction. It is a shame that it has come to this point where the applicant's money, the village's time, and taxpayers' dollars are being spent in this variance process. This could have been easily addressed if only a survey was produced by the order of the permit before the work was begun. I'm asking the zoning board to review this application for the variance and deny the variance to the applicant. Now, since they've been living behind us for a while, I actually know they will be using this as an active structure. They plan on entertaining back there. There's something that hasn't even been truly addressed yet. There is a fence structure that has also been built back there, which should, if it is a structure, it should be 5 feet off the property line, which it isn't. I consider it a structure as well because there is water, electrical, and music sound in this structure.
What structure is that?
This is another structure that went through building and planning. And they, at first, they had to lower the roof, the height of the fence. It was 8 feet. They brought it down to 6 to comply to that. But I still feel it is a structure, not a fence. Because a structure has this electric, the water. A fence doesn't have electric, water, and sound in it.
If they put, like some more greenery between you and them, because my understanding, you just said that there was like a barrier?
Yes, and they have replaced the greenery. It's not done well. If you really look at it, you can't put a leyland on top of a blue spruce and expect either one of them to grow properly. They're literally 3 feet apart from one another.
And it was my understanding that the stop work order didn't go forward because, for safety issues, it was determined that for safety issues to complete the structure. And that's why they completed it.
At the time, most of the garage was already trimmed and sided. The portico was actually an added piece, and it could have been stopped. It should have been stopped from the very beginning of the build of even the garage because no survey was presented. And that's what the application came in and the permit was granted to them, that a survey had to be supplied to building and planning, and it never was until maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
So you're saying an existing survey, not a proposed survey, not a plot plan, an existing survey of the property, no existing survey of the property made up any part of the building permit application initially,
From what I've been told,
but a permit was granted.
yes, under the conditions that they supplied a survey.
Can't speak on that because we don't know.
No, but I've never heard of that.
No. Well, thank you very much.
Did they have any other questions?
Oh, sorry, is there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here to speak on this matter? Yeah, back up.
Yeah, could you actually show the pictures of where my house sits in the wall in comparison?
One second.
In a moment, let's let him go because Deirdre is the one in the control of the computer.
Right.
Go ahead.
This is the first I'm hearing about any survey issue. I actually have with me a copy of the revised survey that was done afterwards, which has the initial survey date pre-work of 4/18/23, and then the final was done 5/12/24. So I'm not sure, that's a new one to me. I don't know why that's,
So you did submit a survey
Yes.
with the application permit?
yes, there was a survey of the existing property with the proposed garage on the survey as part of the building application.
And that's the one that initially showed the proposed portico in line with the back of the garage, and you were asked to modify that to meet the 5-foot setback, and you created a 7-foot setback and resubmitted a new plot plan based upon the existing survey, all as a part of the application before a building permit was issued.
So the the survey with the proposed structure just had the original plans on it without the modified setback, I'll call it. I was never told that I needed to get another redrawn survey, however.
I see. So it was a sort of a note on the
There was a
application, on the permit instead of a resubmission.
Right, there was a
Okay.
note on the cover of the permit granted that just said note setback issue,
Okay.
or overhang setback issue, something to that effect.
Right.
So you were never requested to get another survey?
No.
But there was a survey showing the portico, albeit not of the final design, that was submitted with the initial set of submissions per the checklists.
Yes, when I filed for the building permit.
Okay.
Like I said, I have with me a copy of the survey of the existing post-built, if you'd like to see it, but
Well,
Is
it does
part
have
of
the
Do you have-
dates.
Is that the material that we have?
It should be included.
do you have the original one that he submitted?
Do you have a prior survey before the structure burned? Or did you search for one in any records?
With me, no. But I had gotten a survey done just prior to submitting the permit as part of the permit, I guess,
Right.
package.
And this pen on here that you're referring to, that's just
Yeah,
done by you after the fact to clarify? Okay, so that's not part of any official submission, but that's what we're talking. The change that was noted
Right.
on the issued permit.
Right, that was when
so
we
it was-
discussed the 5-foot
The change was
requirement.
made essentially through text on the issued permit plans.
Yes.
Okay.
How do you know the structure burnt down? In a total burn down, complete?
It didn't burn all the way to the ground, but the damage was substantial.
How do you know the structure remains as the same footprint prior to the,
Because it's on the survey.
which survey?
He has the
Well, there
one-
was a survey done with the burnt but not removed garage. I
Right.
guess I'll say that. And as well as the fact that the foundation was still there afterwards,
Bad question.
after the tear down.
Because the survey submitted as part of your application was after you had started constructing or your proposed, right?
There were
No, that's
two
right.
surveys. There was one prior to removing the old garage or building the new one, and then there is now a revised survey after the work had been completed.
And the one prior had recited the dimensions of the semi-burnt garage.
Yes, it showed
There we
the
go.
existing with two blockouts, I say, for the
Okay.
extension,
Got it.
saying proposed.
To give you a reference of what the size of the structure was.
Right, it
Right.
said something to the effect of proposed overhang or something
Uh-huh.
like that, proposed covered area, something to that effect.
All right.
Because your CO does not state the dimensions of.
Right, the house, as I mentioned earlier, was built roughly 90-something years ago, so it was a certificate of existing use,
So we're
which was very
relying-
vague.
But there was the survey from 1996 or whatever it was.
And now he just put it in the record.
So,
Is there any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Calucci. Anybody else who wants to speak on this application? Should we close it?
So, well, why don't we ask exactly what the verbiage we should use to hold it open is? Right, because if we close the hearing, we have 60 days to offer a decision, but we can't take new testimony, is my understanding. I'm sorry, can we get clarification here? I know we've done this before when we had Mark, but if we hold the hearing open, what is the verbiage that we would use to essentially keep the hearing unclosed so that we could take new testimony at the next meeting if we need to?
You would adjourn it.
Okay, sorry.
So just request to adjourn this meeting till the next,
This case.
oh, sorry. But do we need to do that, or we can't make a decision on this?
I think we can discuss it and we can request further information from the building department. But it gives us the option of hearing additional testimony.
If we need to,
On the
we could.
record from the public, if we need to.
Okay, so then I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this matter to the next meeting, next zoning board meeting next month.
Can the board be specific what information you're looking for during the adjournment?
A clarification on active and passive use.
I would also like to request from the building department or inspector to clarify the discrepancy between the different testimonies on how what information was present when the permit was issued and how the variance, how it came about that the variance was requested after a permit was issued, seemingly approving what was built, if that makes sense. We have conflicting testimony, and I'd just like to get some clarity on how that happened.
Bring the notes of the building inspector and the timeline together.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
also request any records that may be within the village's archives with respect to the premises prior surveys or any other
We have the survey
historical.
from 1996.
From
but
1996.
That's,
And that was internal to our file, not provided by the applicant, correct?
no, I think that was internal.
That was
I don't
internal
think-
to our file, not provided by
Yeah.
the applicant.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so does anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Andrew?
Who moved, Tracy?
I
You
moved.
moved, I seconded.
She seconded. He seconds.
And when is the next meeting, Cindy?
August 22nd.
Oh, that's good, because we can let the public know.
August
Yes, all right.
So we're going to adjourn to August 22nd.
Yeah,
So, did we vote?
we did.
Oh, all in favor?
Right,
Aye.
did we vote? We did.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought we did. Okay. So our next matter is 112 Arlington Avenue, appeal number ZB 0007-24, Suffolk County Tax Map 206-0011-002-0027, zoning RB2 Residential District. The property owner is Joseph Dovey. Applicant is Brookhaven Expeditors, Andrew Malgamara. The contact is Brookhaven Expeditors, Andrew Malgamara. Public hearing pursuant to Village Code, Section 250-33. The applicant requests the following variances to maintain an existing driveway expansion with a width of 9.6 feet where 5 feet is permitted. Variance number 1, all driveways providing access to any lot shall be located entirely on such lot, and no portion of such driveway shall be located on adjoining lots in whole or in part. Constructed driveway is currently being shown as partly on the adjacent property to the north. Variance number 2 is 3-A. Any part of a driveway which is located forward of the front foundation line of a dwelling and forward of a garage may not exceed the width of the garage door by more than 5 feet and may not be located less than 5 feet from any side lot line. Constructed driveway is extended 9.6 feet at the northwest corner of the garage and 7.6 feet from the northeast corner of the garage, where only a 5-foot extension is allowed. Variance number 3 is Section 3, subsection B. Any part of a driveway which is located forward of the front foundation line of a dwelling where there is no garage may not exceed 20 feet in width and may not be located less than 5 feet from any side lot line. Constructed driveway is up to and extending further beyond the northern property line where a 5-foot setback is permitted. So is anybody here to, there you are.
I'm here.
Go ahead.
Yes. Andrew Malguinera, 713 Main Street, Port Jefferson, the agent. So I'm over here is extension of a existing driveway, not by much, but I don't know if you guys have pictures of it, but very well done pavers. They have an easement agreement with a neighbor that is affected, signed, recorded easement, and the only person who would be affected would be that neighbor to the left of the house. The reason for the extension was because the driveway was too thin for the amount of cars that they have, and it's very well done, big property, not a small property that you could even tell that it extends more than the average driveway would extend. And as the report was given, there's no effects to the area in any way. It only enhances it. And if the board has any questions.
Are there any other driveways with hardscape that are like similar to this in the area?
It's probably the nicest driveway on the block, honestly. No, most are asphalt. But I mean, it was already pavered. They extend the pavers slightly.
What's the purpose of the driveway extending back behind the garage? Like, what are they using it for there?
Just for added space. I mean, they have multiple cars, multiple kids. The garage is set up that takes up the existing driveway. So if there's a car in the garage, any car in the driveway, they couldn't get out. So the cars are parked to the side of the garage. So anything in the garage could exit. It's very tastefully done. I mean, no, I don't think there's any issues with the neighborhood.
Is there other pictures on there?
The survey actually would be very helpful.
Yeah, the survey and the pictures.
Hold on one second. I just don't want to skim through.
Has the board seen this driveway? Yeah. Okay.
So there's like planters in the driveway. What are the purpose? Because they're almost
Decorative.
obstacles to drive around with.
It's just decorative. I mean, again, it's very nicely done. Fits the house. I believe.
So now it's my understanding that the one towards the street is kind of on public property, village property.
The one towards the
The
street.
street, the one that's right there. Oops. See the one in yellow?
Yes. Yeah. And we're gonna discuss with Highway regarding that.
Yeah, because you would
Right.
have to have them sign.
Right. So if Highway signs off on it, we'll keep it. If they say it has to go in the right of way, then it has to go.
Yeah.
We'll have to address that after this. Yes.
So the whole, the denser hatch area between the yellow bits?
Yes.
That's all the new paving in question that we're discussing?
Correct, and it was already previously gravel, as you see from this survey. It was gravel when he bought the house, so it was acting as a driveway, just wasn't a formal structure the way he has made it, but it, he just pretty much decorated it more than was there originally.
Does the client have any indication of for how long it's been used that way?
He purchased the house within the last year, so, yeah.
Was a permit applied for?
No, he didn't realize he needed a permit for a driveway. And it was acting as a driveway to begin with. It was gravel, so all he did was paver over what was already there.
And is there's a retaining wall in question, was that built as a part of this?
Yes, but it's a 2-foot retaining wall, and again, on the neighboring property, which they have an easement.
That's the highlighted yellow
Correct,
portion.
correct. And they have an easement agreement with with that neighbor.
And was that replacing an existing portion of retaining wall and repairing it?
It was assured up because it was gravel, and now they put pavers, so to support properly, they
It was
added
kind
it.
of mounded and had a grade change, and that
Correct.
grade change was hardened.
It was shored up, yeah.
Recorded easement submitted as part of the application?
Yes.
That's one of the 3 variances that are before us today on this site, correct?
Yes. Yeah, the width, the part, again, I didn't write the code, you didn't write the code, but the part going past the garage, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that I don't know who it affects, but I'm sure there are instances. In this case, I don't feel like it affects anybody.
May I ask for a clarification from staff very quickly? Number 2, one paragraph from the end of the staff report describes a variance for expanded driveway to exceed more than the permitted 5 feet from the width of the detached garage per the code. But the code section that's cited earlier says it's the width of the garage door by more than 5 feet.
Yes, so that part of the code is that it can't exceed 5 feet past the garage. And it's exceeding 5 feet past the garage. I believe at its widest up to this property line, it's 9.6. On the rear end, it kind of tapers and gets to 7.6. So that's one of the variances. It also needs a 5-foot setback from the property line, which it doesn't have because it's encroaching. And then the first one was that it's encroaching.
Right, and that's being dealt with, I think, in the third item at the end, right? Is the side yard setback. Or
Yes.
the property line setback, say, the 5 feet. So the grant of variance for a driveway, so the, in other words, I
I think two of them copied, but it's supposed to be the side yard setback. That's what happened. Do you see
all
what I
right,
mean?
we'll clarify this in
Yeah.
work session. Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other questions? Antonio? You thinking? I was waiting, no? Is there any questions from the audience? Or anybody who wants to speak? Give it. Thank you. Okay, this is Ken Manfee.
That's correct.
111 Arlington Drive.
Kenneth Manfree, 111 Arlington Avenue. Okay?
Yes.
I have lived across the street from this house since 1974. The house was built in 1902. The previous owner had paved the driveway wider than the garage doors. As I'm learning, as I listen, this construction has done nothing but enhance the street. The boxes around, the flower boxes, are the applicant went out of his way to save 2 magnificent flowering cherry trees. They are absolutely beautiful. He did everything he possibly could to make it fit into the neighborhood. The gravel that was there was used as a driveway, parking cars for the previous owner. The pavers enhance it. Also, with his putting all of that effort into making the driveway that much bigger, it keeps the cars off the street, Arlington Avenue, because a number of years ago, somebody decided that the street was too narrow and wouldn't allow parking in front of his house now. This construction deserves these variances. It is absolutely magnificent.
So I take it you're in favor of this application?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manfee.
Okay.
I'm sorry, may I ask a quick question? You said you lived across from there for how long?
From 1974,
And
50 years.
how long roughly, if you can recollect, have people been using that area for parking?
Since the previous owner, I would say 20 years, 25 years, something like that.
Got it. And at some point, the gravel was brought in, and then
Yeah,
more recently, these
the
pavers.
previous
Okay.
owner had lifts in the garage. He was a old Cadillac car collector, and he would put them in the garage, put them on the driveway, put them in the street, put them under those trees. I am totally in favor. It is just, it's magnificent. It's just a wonderful, wonderful structure. It doesn't do anything to harm anything in the neighborhood.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else? Did you want, there's somebody else who wants to speak.
Oh, someone else will speak?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry.
I agree with the Manfreys. We are a very tight-knit neighborhood. We actually have walking paths that go through each yard into the next. I can access the Manfreys, which is 2 houses down from mine, and actually on Arlington, because we even have gates and stuff. So I agree with him 100%. We're a tight-knit neighborhood. We love having Joe there. The biggest thing I want to say coming up here, and it's something that I would like to approach this board as well as the ARC, we need to start educating our residents with the code knowledge. Joe had no idea that he needed any of these permits and all, and he's a very educated, self-made entrepreneur himself. But there are so many codes out there, and even in myself reading the variances, I had no idea your driveway isn't supposed to be wider than your garage. But this is something I think that whether we do it weekly, monthly, on the village website, we begin to post a code with an explanation and start educating our residents. Because there are so many residents that either don't know or do know, and they do the work, they take down the trees, they're willing to pay the fine, and they look for a variance. So we need to educate our residents.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Malgamera. Now you, back up again.
Sorry about that.
May I ask a quick question?
Of course.
The applicant, not the applicant, the neighbor on the side that has the easement.
Yes.
Have they, in addition to the easement which has been submitted, is there any other material testimony? Are they present?
I don't believe they're here. No.
Thank you.
Yeah, they've been supportive as far as I'm aware.
Question about lot coverage.
Yep.
Are we starting to exceed or approach the coverage of the zoning district?
Without knowing the numbers, I'm a professional. I've been doing this a long time. This is a big lot, so I don't believe this on this lot would be even approaching that.
RB2.
Yeah, and on top of that, again, the driveway code is what it is, and it's kind of extends across the board. But as you can see, this house is bigger than your average house, so needs a little more than your average parking. Then and here we are.
Okay, is there anything else? Any questions, comments? No? Then I will make a motion to close the hearing. Second? Good. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I copied it or not.
No, we put it on the record, recording of the decision, not for the
That's what
public
I,
hearing.
that's what I thought, okay, thanks. that there's these. Did you go there?
Yeah, swung by right before the meeting. That, so the old driveway is in this pink, and the new driveway is in these pavers. Where it says gravel there on the survey,
No,
this
it's
is
no
old.
longer
That's
there.
why I hate this, because everybody's giving us 1991.
Yeah, I thought this was.
Well,
I thought-
no, I will say this. Not every project should require an updated survey. So even if, now they didn't submit for a building permit, but if they had submitted for a building permit, you show an existing survey and you say what you're going to propose to do. It costs an extra, some hundreds of dollars to come back with a revised survey after the fact. Some projects require that. If you're building a building, you want to prove that you put it where you said you were going to put it. But
I mean,
I don't
even
know
when
that
we were in
that's
the
the case
meeting
here.
the other day, they said if they told us this was gravel.
No, it's paved.
Well, now, I'm hearing that,
Yes.
but when I was there, they said it's gravel.
And that's
so
what
we
it was.
thought,
That's what this is about, because they did the work to pave this where it had been gravel before, which had just kind of creeped to that point and never been called on it, if that makes sense. Actually, I think this is kind of a survey mistake.
Literally means, where is the 2023?
Oh, yeah, no, you're not missing anything.
Is this supposed to be a post-construction survey, or this is the survey that was?
I think this was submitted with the application.
You know what? This is probably
Not a post-construction survey.
This is probably a survey done with the purchase of the home. If he's a new, right?
It's not required.
It's not required, but it's not stupid.
Yeah, but a lot of people, a lot of people I know is recommending.
Especially nowadays, you should get a survey.
I'm questioning if we even really need the updated one, though. I mean, like,
No, we know what they're asking for.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd
So
be
this he
nice.
has an easement, so it's really.
Not recorded.
It's, I thought they said it was recorded.
It says it was no recorded page on the easement with the library page.
No?
Nope, go get it, she's got it.
It would make sense why we don't have a final survey, but if it's already done.
Your effect, and this neighbor did not present today, correct?
Yeah. But he
Well,
signed
but that's,
it.
okay,
Here's
that's
the boundary
thing.
line
I
for it.
wanted to hear from that neighbor, but that's not
I know.
But
necessarily
he's saying
germane.
there's
If
no,
there's
it's
a-
not recorded.
What's
so
not
talk
recorded?
to me about easements, because
The
that I'm
agreement,
much
these-
less
So look,
familiar
so
with.
I'm not,
But it's not
I'm not
recorded
contesting the
with
the validity of the easement, but
Okay.
I need, where's the recording cover page that shows that now it is lodged against these lots?
Notarized.
Okay.
Yeah, but keep going.
Yeah.
A lot of times you
Well,
would
we're gonna be
submit that then to
reconvening
the
this
town.
party in
Right.
30
You
days
know,
anyway.
Yeah.
We just want to
and
get
get
clarification. We
the
can
line
get
number
clarification
and
without
all that.
having the hearing open.
Right.
I mean,
Cindy, do we
I
know
think-
if this was actually recorded with, like, the town? Okay.
Well, hold on a second.
The boundary agreement.
Can you go and, is that what this is, okay?
So,
no, as long as it's connected, sure. Hold on. Because I always have to hook up with my.
do you know if
Can
they,
you
if
ask
they
him
recorded it or?
I'm gonna search.
if it's a question that's germane to ask us? Sure, I was just, thank you. Sure.
Because the
No,
first,
she says it's not recorded.
because the first decision we have to make on this application, one of the actual, right, is no thing can be on somebody else's thing. You understand?
But they agreed and said it's okay, you could do
Yes,
it.
they did
So that's
agree.
fine.
They did agree.
And I think it runs, if you told me right, it runs with the land, so
But-
it's like from then on, it's,
Yes, but I want
Yeah.
to say, what if they decide, that was dated April the 4th,
if they decide they don't wanna do it?
and they say, do not record it, we revoke it, we would never know, and the fact that we were
But
not given.
apparently it runs with the land now, it's
Yes.
there permanently.
Yes, but you have to record it.
No, 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 like, if you guys decide to grant this today,
Our decision runs with the land, we know that.
right, that's what I'm saying, so my request from the planning department is that if you guys decide to grant the garage extension, or, I mean,
That
driveway
this then
extension,
be filed with the town of Brookhaven?
not even so much, it should have been,
It's
but,
gonna be recorded in Riverhead.
that the condition is that
Like
if
a deed.
if the same wording that the easement was given also is the condition on that
Find out,
permit.
what's the
Because how
tax
can
map
you
on the-
approve
anyone of these?
Right, if it
something
could be
when-
revoked.
when it's saying in the easement thing, the second it
District
needs
206.
reconstruction, they have to put it on their land.
So what's the address actually?
Because then they can come back and say,
112
well,
Arlington.
Village said,
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble following you across conversation. Do we want, actually, guys, can we just turn this into one conversation?
Yeah.
Because we're doing two or three. Let's start the proper deliberation.
So, well, let's start with this easement. Where's
Yeah,
the
I'd
Antonio?
like to hear what
So
Ginger
you
was saying.
want to have this put put in the decision the wording from the easement saying,
Because I don't,
Because one of the problems of what we're asking to do is affect somebody else's property rights.
right, so that's the thing, because in the easement it says that if they need to reconstruct it, it goes back on their property. But the village would grant it and it could stay on the neighboring properties.
oh, so
It's
we
not
could
like-
put in the event that they
Right,
reconstruct it,
so
then it
an
must be
approval
on
in
their
the
own
event that
property.
it-
Well,
it-
Okay. I
No,
get it.
hang on, because we're granting a variance to build something where, let's say let's just look at the third variance. There's a 5-foot setback requirement. We're not granting a -% variance for
No,
that.
but the
We're
first
not
one-
granting negative 2
The first one
feet.
where you're allowing it to be on a neighbor's property.
That's it, right, that's
Okay.
the
Just
first
that
one,
one.
yeah.
Because I don't think that that should be something that runs with the land. You can't grant that if it's on a neighboring property.
No. We would say it would have to be something,
Subject
we
to
allow,
recording.
subject
Right.
to
Well,
the
no, and
conditions
also
of the
subject, if
easement.
they change
If
the,
they change it.
change the driveway, then it goes back to on their property.
It does
That-
say if it
The
gets
way it is now,
reconstructed.
they'll let it go, but if they reconstruct it, then it's
So-
Well,
going to
hang
go.
on, we're essentially giving them permission to have done the work beyond their property line, as opposed to the neighbors doing the work on their property. And we're saying it's conditioned to, it's pursuant to the easement. So the easement says,
Right.
you gotta get rid of that, the easement gets rid of it, and if they get taken to court because they're on their neighbor's property in violation of the easement, our variance isn't gonna mean anything.
Well, that's why
Like-
I want it noted that the grant was in conjunction with the easement,
We
that
can't,
whatever
we
the
can't
easement
variance
says.
onto
is
somebody
Let me
else's
tell you
property.
something right now. Where's that recorded?
I agree. I would like to
But
punt
they're
up,
going
like,
to get it recorded after if we grant it.
Nope.
you know, I would do it the other way around.
Record prior to our, absolutely, because think about it. And if I was gonna record that easement, you wanna know what else I would attach to it as a addendum?
Well,
The survey at the time.
So you,
Depicting
so this
exactly
way,
what
because
the
you think
hell-
they're gonna turn around and might change their mind and say, we never allowed
Or
this.
if they go to sell a home, let me tell you something, this is a blemish on the home.
Of course, the people who granted the easement.
On either party.
Yeah.
I don't
Whoever
know,
goes to
I don't
sell.
know nearly as much about this, but I would like to also insist that before we grant this variance, that they record the easement officially.
Yes, thank
And
you.
essentially get the neighbor 1,000% on the record that this is cool with them, because I'm not gonna grant this variance otherwise.
So we don't need to get, we don't need the neighbor to get on record.
It's
because-
not their testimony before us, it's their
but if
recording
it's-
of that.
But if
of
it's
that.
notarized and it's filed, then that's.
But
If
it's
it- Right,
not-
we just want it
yeah.
filed.
It's not-
We
has
just
to
want
be
it
filed.
filed. Yeah, we're all on the same
We
page.
don't need to call them down and have them
Once it's
provide
recorded,
testimony.
and we are a race notice jurisdiction in the state of New York, which means that not only do you have to be bona fide, but you have to be recorded.
They called
right?
up on the
First
last.
one to the recording office is the
So
winner.
now, what happens is, let's say the parties stipulated at some point down the road to revoke this agreement. Guess what would follow in the county ledger? A revocation of that recorded easement, so that it puts on notice any subsequent owner on either parcel would have what? Constructive notice of this.
Yes.
Okay? We can't make, what, the decision we're about to make.
Yeah, what
here-
happens if they sell their property tomorrow, they
Correct.
haven't recorded that,
That's
and
right.
somebody can
You got a
rightfully
big
rightfully
title
claim
problem.
that I didn't know.
You're gonna-
My
Yeah.
question is, how do you know it's not recorded?
We
just
don't.
searched.
There's no,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
and there should be a page on the front
Suffolk
that
County
says
is
where it's recorded.
notorious
LIBOR number,
for
page
taking
The
number.
expedited
forever.
elected is one that gave it to me, so I don't know if
So I
he
just
has
searched.
information I don't.
I just
Should,
searched.
can we call him?
Well, I think what we're gonna be doing is punting on both of these today, and this punt is to immediately get in touch with the applicant.
Get a cell phone
And
number,
no,
I'm
it's,
sure.
but we don't have to resolve that today. We just have to reach, because we're reconvening in a month
So
to
do you want
deal with the
that
other
it
one.
gets
To
adjourned
process,
as
right.
well to next month?
So they actually
And then
don't-
the
Well,
one way could be,
we can't adjourn it because we closed the hearing. So we can't
Okay,
bring new
yeah.
testimony, but we could request documentation.
right, that's what I mean, like,
Yeah.
keep it open in the sense that you're waiting for.
Not-
to
not-
either
not
was
make a
recorded
decision.
Or be recorded.
Correct.
The only problem, the only, well, I will say the only.
We have
I
60
can never
days,
connect to the
right?
Wi-Fi.
Wait a second, Antonio, though, when you record something now, Suffolk County,
Yeah.
how many months is it
I'm
gonna
gonna give
take
you
to
the
get
good-
the
I'm gonna give you
recorded?
the good through date right now. It tells me on the county what they're good through.
Okay, because I was gonna say it could
Well,
take
When you-
months to
but
get
when you
the recorded.
But hold on, when you deposit the document,
Yeah.
you get a receipt saying,
And then they could bring that in.
That
and
would,
say
should, that should be
right.
enough, and we
Okay.
would approve the variance
Okay.
on a contingency that,
But-
that it,
but-
that.
but still,
Always
technically-
subservient to.
Technically,
Not-
until you
not
get that,
really.
yeah.
Right.
Well, but what
But
I'm,
it's
sa-
good in-
what I'm saying is we would also include verbiage that we're approving the variance always subject to the conditions of an easement.
Right.
Right,
That's
so,
just what I
of a
wanted.
filed
Of a
easement.
recorded.
Of a recorded
recorded
That's
easement,
just what I
exactly.
wanted, I didn't want it to be be a blank
Agreed.
approval
Yeah.
because
Dangerous.
it's on
Two very
the
dangerous.
neighbor's property.
And we're
That's-
doing belts and suspenders, because we've never done this before either.
I've
This
never
particular one I
seen
have
it.
not
can
seen
never connect to the
before.
Well-
Wi-Fi in this building. I don't know
You?
why. It always
But I
just says no.
was pretty sure that when we asked before, they said it was recorded.
Well, then if it was, they'll just show us
Show
and we'll
us.
approve, well,
Yeah.
we'll discuss
Yeah,
whether
there's
to
a lot
approve.
added.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we're gonna discuss that now and
We
just say
could discuss
approved
whether to
on
approve it
whether-
right now.
Lot coverage.
No, the lot coverage
Assuming-
I'm not worried about,
Lot
plus
coverage is
lot
only
coverage doesn't, but
That
lot
wasn't
coverage
an
doesn't even
easement,
apply
was
to
it?
driveways, although the primary driveway wouldn't count. An additional driveway, I could argue, would
Can I
count.
move you over here?
Does patio count? Every municipality is different, I've forgotten.
I don't, the way it,
Not generally.
I can look it up.
I don't-
The way it reads right now, I think it's like accessory structures specific.
Some places say once it's 1 foot off the ground, so any sort of
On
hardscape
grade,
doesn't
on-
count. A lot of places really are worried about hardscape, though.
But then would that
Um,
count
see what they're-
retaining walls? Because technically they have a height,
Um,
usually have more than 1 foot? Or
No,
if it's
but
1
you
to
would
2
measure
feet?
the square footage of it in plan, so it'd be the
Right, so that
thickness of the
would-
wall.
it would
Technically would count
count.
as lot coverage,
Yeah.
yes. It's an accessory structure.
Let me find out.
Not a lot of
This is
area.
like a 26,000 square foot lot, so I don't think they get to it.
Yeah.
Yes, and if we're just counting the portion of the expansion, I don't think, I can look at that and see we're not at 30%.
Yeah, but just think about how big it would have to be to cover that much.
Take all these puzzle pieces and
Massive.
shove them into a corner. You'd have to fill, yeah,
everything
one of these.
supplied to them up through July 8th. So
Oh,
if
that's
you
not
walked in on
bad. They're
July
pretty-
9th with the documents, deed, a certificate or something, they haven't processed that bid yet.
That's pretty good.
If
They've
you walked
caught
in on
up.
the 10th, nope, the 11th, so right now, as if you walked in on the 8th, they have chewed through all that processing and they are lodged.
It was just
So
recently,
like if you
especially
just-
during COVID,
Yeah,
that
if
you
just
waited
paid your
months and
mortgage
months
off,
and
let's say you
months
paid
to
your
get
mortgage off,
something.
That paid trail sent you a SAT and you went down there to record it on the 8th to discharge it. If you went on the 8th, it's in now.
That's it. Good.
Or it's rejected with notes why.
Yeah.
Gotta record.
All
So,
right, so do we want to talk the merits of the rest of the application?
we're
Stipulating
doing
that
112 now since we're talking about it.
Thank you very
Might
much.
as well.
Sure.
Well,
Okay.
because we're punting on the other one, we might have a conversation, make sure all our questions are asked, and then call it.
So
Okay.
for 112, I mean, short of having the easement filed, I mean, it's not creating, an undesirable change of the character of the neighborhood. Like, the neighbor is fine with it.
It's a substantial variance.
It's what's substantial?
It's 100% plus beyond the property line.
Yeah, but they
Well,
have,
he's saying-
but they have an easement.
Right, so ignore beyond the property line, it's still 100% variance.
In
Well,
consideration
if
of,
it crosses the property line, it has to be within 5 feet.
No,
It's
right,
negative.
but it's 0 feet,
Yeah.
basically,
Right.
right? So, I don't know, what
well, he's
bothers-
saying in terms of the
Yeah.
boundary line agreement, then there is no,
So because
I-
the neighbor is allowing for the wall
Right.
and the easement, I'm less concerned
Yeah.
about, it is a 100% variance. We will say that
Yeah.
that's a substantial variance. It's the
Still
third
doesn't
one on the
displace
We
list.
would reference it, but we would also say there's an existing.
Mitigated by the
Mitigated by
boundary.
the fact that the neighbor is acknowledging and accepting in the form of an easement
Yeah,
that that's okay.
legal-
So it's kind of a property sharing thing.
Hey, I got
Leave
an
that-
idea.
I'm fine with
Every
that.
neighbor just agrees along a whole strip of land to change the zoning. And
Now-
they all just become.
Now you've got a
commercial
society
land.
here. We're talking about the government.
So we still don't,
All right.
displace our.
But
But it's-
what is weirder to me is just, the code, it's the width issue,
Mhm.
right? It's less the setback issue because of the easement,
Right.
right? That's basically making this a funky condition whereby you're on your neighbor's land, sorted out with property law,
Mhm.
right? But the width is basically just saying like, hey, I want more parking lot in my front yard, so let's just make a double wide driveway over what the code would allow. That's no problem, right?
To
Because it
save
looks
the
pretty.
trees.
Right, well,
Mhm.
the thing is, it's a beautifully done thing
Mhm.
for a big parking lot in your front yard. But the code is basically written that way because they don't want people's front yards to become parking lots.
Mhm.
Like,
but it should be written as in proportion to your house. So
It's-
if you have a tiny little house, you can't have, a driveway the same
well,
size as
it's
the house.
written in
but-
proportion to your garage door.
Yeah,
Or
so
if
the
you don't have a
but the
garage door,
door
20
is a
feet.
double.
So what did we see for the garage
right?
door?
It was a double
Plus
garage
5
door.
feet.
And walk me through the highway part, I didn't
Oh,
catch that. What was that?
The property line is here, but the street is
okay,
here.
the
So they
spillover.
built on,
Yeah, yeah.
up
Oh,
to the
see,
street,
this-
and they're
Yeah, yeah,
beyond,
yeah.
they're
Yeah.
on village property. But that's true for like most properties.
But they just have to get,
The highway.
Yeah, when you do landscape work right up to the road, you're working in village
Of
land,
course.
yeah. So it's 2 carriage doors that look to be approximately 8 feet each.
This is from 2013.
Looks to me like you've got 24 inches on the left, 12 in the middle, and maybe 24 on the right. So that would be 5 feet, and then this is 20 feet, so
it's 5.1.
16, 16 plus 5, yeah, close enough. So those are probably shyer of 2 feet. So it's 18, 12, 18, with total of garage doors is about 16
Is that what a
feet.
normal garage door is, 8 feet?
They're almost always standard foot dimensions, unless this is super old and idiosyncratic.
Well, then they would be
the-
small, but now.
We're looking at about a 16-foot, which means that the code would allow for a 21-foot driveway,
Plus,
1
there's
foot
a
wider than
space
the
in
garage.
between, isn't there?
Right?
Is there a space in between?
Yeah, about a foot.
What do you mean,
So-
Tracy? What do you mean by
Here.
that?
In between the 2 garage doors.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I got
So
you.
it's 8 feet,
I'm looking,
a
reading
foot.
that as like
Yep.
18 inches, 12 inches,
Yep.
18
Yep.
inches, which totals to 4 feet, and if each of those is 18, or 16. sorry,
Gotcha.
It'd be
making
30.
16 plus 4 is 20, which is what we have.
Okay.
But we're well beyond that, so all we're doing is arguing about the exact percentage
Right.
of variance.
Exactly.
So assuming 21 is what's required, what are we at? The width here is actually the widest, right? We don't have that number.
No,
But
we,
I'm saying that, oh, you said that this is no longer gravel. Okay, never mind. See, that's throwing me off. I keep thinking this is more of a garden than it is.
Last year's homework.
But, and this
I-
is the wall here.
So that's 9.6, that's 7.6, so we could extrapolate,
Mhm.
this is 2.5 more times. So the growth was 2 feet, 2.5 times 2 is 6, 7. So 7 plus 9.6 make it shy 17 plus 20, so 37, where 21 would be required. So the variance is.
Not required, allowed.
I don't have, does anybody have a
Max.
copy of the
It's max.
application?
Yes, thank you.
What copy
Sewer
of the
district on
application?
Arlington or
Do you have
cesspool?
a copy of the application?
No.
Because that
Sewer?
usually spells
Well,
it.
you know what? I'm
No
sorry, it's right
sewer.
here.
Well, that's nice.
36.5 minus
It's
21.
like, the-
Telling you. You hear that, guys? Cesspool up there, no
just
sewer.
looking for, this.
Yeah.
Seven.
You know how they say
they
it.
specify it right here.
Yeah, to specify the exact number.
Hope it's not under that.
Width, 9.6 feet.
The what? Oh.
Required 5 feet.
Right.
So
So they're 9.6 feet over.
they're 9.6 feet requested, they're
Right, 9.6 feet where you're allowed up to 5.
5.
You watch how fast that easement's
No,
got.
it's
to-
wider here,
I can only go off of what,
Imagine.
What
but
they're,
it's wider here.
then we have a problem.
Well,
Well, we have an easement.
all right, where's,
hang on a second. Going by my number, and we'll verify if we
Yeah,
can
it
rate
can
the
never
variance
happen, right?
first.
See the width of the
Gotta be on
garage
the
door
outs-
of a more than 5.
can we ask you just,
I'll read that as a 73% variance.
so here it says that the width is 9.6 feet where 5 is required?
Here,
So
so
then-
the code, let's start with the code, because I think there's a few confusions here. The code in question says, any part of a driveway which is located forward of the front foundation line of a dwelling, which is everything from this point here forward, right? So all of this is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Any part of a driveway which is located forward of the front foundation line of a dwelling and forward of a garage may not exceed the width of the garage door by more than 5 feet. So if we assume from that drawing, from that image, 16-foot total of the 2 garage doors plus 5 feet is 21 feet, right? That's the baseline of what would be allowed.
That's not the way I interpret it.
Well, it says may not exceed the width of the garage door by more than 5 feet. We were just discussing, I think the text of the last part of the variance is wrong.
Okay.
We need to say add door into that.
Right.
But they've got a 5-foot add on top of that. You can go wider than the garage door. And so what, the 5 foot is not the limit. The 5 foot is a freebie on top of the
Freebie.
width of the garage door.
Subject to side,
So what, how big is this
So-
now? So this is 21 feet, you
Right.
said?
So
What they have now?
21 feet is the width of the garage, total width of the 2 garage doors plus 5 feet.
5 feet.
So 21 is the baseline that they would be allowed for the width of any driveway forward of the house.
And
per
how
this
much do we
code.
have?
What we have is this line right here, which
Yes.
I believe is something around
but stay with that. So
over
you're
30
allowed
feet.
that, but now, once you've determined that line, tell me how far, I forget the easement, how far am I off the property line?
Say this again?
So I understand you're allowed to have this 5 foot, right? What would you call
Well,
it?
that's not including the,
I'm not
Buffer.
counting the easement, but the
No, I
easement's
know.
back there.
But you're saying that you can be wider than 5 feet,
Yes.
right? Then, okay?
21 total is
Fine.
what you're allowed in this
Subject
case.
to you still being within your setback.
No, but that's a separate variance.
Separate
So
thing.
we're just talking the
Right.
width. We're talking number
so is
2.
it 5 feet on both sides or 5 feet
No, it's
I mean-
just 5 foot added to the 16.
added to
So
the
the total
16?
width of your driveway could squiggle
Right,
Yeah.
and be 21 feet wide max, per
Okay.
per the letter of that code.
right. He's
But-
right. He's right.
But the 9.6 over here is not the variance.
Oh, I see.
That's what's
Because,
written, that's what's.
but
yeah,
that's a mistake.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's, yeah.
essentially, if you see here, it says grant a variance for the expanded driveway to exceed more than the permitted 5 feet from the width of the detached garage. That's not what the code says.
Right, yeah,
So I think we need to fix the verbiage of this
And
variance
this
if
is
we
wrong
grant
too
it.
in the application, because it's saying
Right,
the
so
width
the
is
numbers,
9.6.
so the numbers that we're actually calculating are whatever the widest width is, which, I'm not sure what that is, but my rough calculations had it at 36 and a
Seven.
half,
Minus
which is,
21.
which is a bit, I think I've overjudged it, but, over 30.
Mm-hmm.
Call it 32-ish by
All right,
ball.
so it's 32
Um,
minus 21 is 11.
Right, so 11 over 21 is the percentage of the variance. It's over 50%, it's under 75%. I can't be more precise without the right number.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Okay.
So that's what I'm so maybe we get that clarified as well, since we're kicking things back.
Well, let's just say that the variance is substantial for that,
Okay.
for that specific.
Right, so we'll have
that
the
one.
debate and then get the answers to the details.
Or, but,
All right.
let's say it's substantial. What about the other parts, right, that we need to evaluate, right? I mean, like,
So it's the easement question, it's the setback question, which I think is mitigated by the easement question, even though it's 100% variance. I'm kind of okay with that. It's this last question that bothers me a little bit, because you're basically saying, I felt like paving a big parking lot in my front yard, even though the code says don't do that. Can I do it?
but is it creating an undesirable change? in
Well,
the character of
people
the neighborhood?
like how well he did it. I'm just worried
So
about the
it's-
precedent of
seems-
this. It's like, we're basically saying, because somebody felt like asking permission instead of forgiveness, we would never grant this if somebody hadn't built it already. And I hate making people tear stuff up, but something's bugging me about granting this, because it feels like bad precedent.
Why, though?
Because it's a parking lot. It's a pretty parking lot, but it's a parking lot in your front yard. The whole code is designed to just let you get to your garage with a driveway whose width is carefully strictured, because we don't want everybody's front yards to become parking lots. Like, even in RO, I know there's a bunch of parking lots, those are all legal non-conforming, and they changed the code on Main Street to get rid of the option of having parking lots in your front yard.
Those planters are structures. And I'll tell you the reason why the community is coming out to support it. They love those cherry trees.
Which I'm here for, and I'm not
Okay?
indifferent to that
You take those
fact.
cherry trees out of there, and you watch how fast, it's a different story.
Well, but the question is, how can we grant, I'm okay with granting it if we don't feel like we're creating really bad precedent. That's my problem. How can we make this specific enough to this one where it's not something arbitrary, like he used pretty pavers and the neighbors seem to like cherry trees? Like, that doesn't get it done.
But you also wouldn't,
Well, I
you wouldn't,
thought we
you
wanted-
wouldn't deny a variance just on the fact that it's substantial, would you?
You can.
Well, you can, sure.
You can, but what are the other ones?
You can't deny it only because it was a self-created hardship. If that's the only if that's the only criteria that goes against the applicant, you can't deny it on those grounds alone.
Can it be achieved by
It's
another
definitely a
method?
self-created hardship, though.
based on the fact that it's a self-created hardship?
Only by
I mean,
itself.
that's the
If
only
you answer-
criteria.
If you answer no to the other 4 criteria and yes to self-created hardship, you may not decline that variance. It's part, but this is why they call it a balancing test.
What
It's a
what
little bit of a
else did we
judgment
want,
call.
what other
That's one of the kind
information
of
did we want?
sub-rule stipulations.
Besides the
Always.
actual measurement of the
That's it.
widest part of the driveway?
For this one, that's all. We need
This
the-
is variance
we need
one.
the actual.
And the width of the garage doors, which we don't have.
Yeah,
So-
we basically need to know the actual variance we're granting there.
Right, so it's just a request to clarify the discrepancy in the staff report, and that's it.
Well, we don't have the actual measurement, right? Yeah, we need that.
That's for the,
There's a stamped and signed survey that says that the garage width is 20.1 feet.
Right, but we need the width of the garage doors for the code.
Doors.
We need the width, which is easy enough to measure. What's harder to measure is to the property line here.
Yeah, that's.
Because the width of actually, no, actually, I take that back. I take that back. You can measure the width of the driveway at its widest point, because at this point, it's on the property. It's only here that it's beyond the property line. So you actually could go and just measure the full width of the driveway at its widest point. You wouldn't need to know where the imaginary line of the
exactly.
property
Right.
is. So these things could be done with a tape measure.
We just
don't
need that.
a
We need that
survey.
number there, because like they're telling us it's 9.6.
But I would ask the building department
But
to do that,
it's
not us.
obviously much wider here. Right?
Are we
It's-
interpreting this code correctly? I feel pretty confident about it, but I don't want to just sort of toss a football back in your camp without.
Well, I think you're interpreting the code correctly, but I don't really think I can say that because it's your job to interpret. We're looking at it the same way, I believe.
Okay. We're not making a wild mistake and
No.
just sort of sending us on a round robin here.
No.
Okay, good.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so we're sure that obviously the variance is greater as you move this way because it expands. So we need to, yeah, it's not.
But
9.6.
this is where I was trying to get to how long it had been used that way. Because that's the kind of thing that allows you to most easily make this a differentiatable case from other cases. If someone can demonstrate that something pre-existed the code, you're just like golden done. You can have it, and I'm not going to set any bad precedent for somebody who comes along and paves their
well,
front
what
yard
did the man
tomorrow.
who's,
He said it'd been
he
there
said
for
he'd
20
been there.
years or something, but not, you know.
Even when you look at the application.
So
And he
I've
said
got the
they-
GIS map, I've got the, go back to 2010 for a second on the GIS map. We're at 2020, come down to the box below, 2010. Okay, what's in 2010?
This is fine.
Let's see 07.
well, that's
This is
wider
like-
than the
it's like
driveway.
the guy in the movie, now magnify.
This is all I do all day. This is my whole life.
But see, it looks like it's bigger than the garage.
No, I'm sorry, the garage goes up to here. So, it's about right. It's the red portion, right?
Right, and then they added the gravel,
And then
which
they
would
added
go.
this portion up here.
Go to 2023, take a look at 23. We just got this, yeah.
This is hard to read it on the garage is here, and it goes, this is all mush, but I would, how old can we go?
We could go back, but it doesn't get near. There's,
Wow.
2001.
Oh, yeah, you could see, here's the garage and here's the same.
Yeah, but the idea that someone was parking a car there, unless we see a car in the image, is not really.
But also, doesn't the garage go a lot closer to the property line there? It looks like it's over there. I mean, are those
Yeah,
property
but
I don't
lines?
trust
yeah,
those.
yes, but you
No,
can't
that's
trust
an
those.
angle.
I don't
You
trust
can
the
see-
Yeah,
property
you
line.
can't trust
What
them.
is this?
It's been
Is
taken
this
on
a
an
car?
angle, you see the shadow of
Yeah.
it's going
Yeah,
that way.
truck.
Got it, that makes
And it's
sense.
parked in
So
front.
is that.
Yeah.
So there, he was right, they were parking the cars everywhere.
On the front lawn.
Let's see when that pool showed up in the back. Let me see.
Are you gonna get them on a pool now?
This is how I know. Okay, between 2004 and 2007, they got a swimming pool. You got to see off of that? Nope. Nope. All day I do this. Gracie, if I'm on a real estate deal, you're on the other side, you're in big trouble. Man. You know that?
I'll note it like it, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it with
You
him.
better get a CO.
Which one, which of the three
There's a bunch of
variances are
cars.
you deliberating at the moment?
Well, we're not,
All over the-
we need clarification on the fact that the driveway is wider than the
So I'm
garage.
gonna give you a measurement on the garage door.
And the widest width of the driveway,
And yeah,
which is
Let me
presumed,
back
yeah,
up.
sorry.
I'm gonna give you a measurement on the garage door, there's two, it's a
Yes.
two-car garage.
Yes.
So you want a measurement on one of the garage doors.
Not just the door, that whole,
Well,
you want the whole
law-
structure, right?
The law
Says-
reads,
says the garage
which is
doors.
odd, but it reads, may not exceed the width of the garage door. Now you have two garage doors, is it an 8-foot garage door and an 8-foot garage door combined is 16 feet, therefore you can't go more than 5 feet beyond
That's what
16
we-
feet,
Or is-
even though the rest of your
Right.
garage structure.
No,
Yes.
Plus 5 feet, plus 5 feet. So, may not exceed the garage door by more than 5 feet.
The garage door.
Well, so assume a one garage door scenario, which is what whoever wrote this code did unimaginatively. We have to figure out how to apply it to two, but just assume a garage with one door.
Yes.
They're saying it's not being set by the width of the garage, it's being set by the door.
Right. So
plus
let's
five-
say you have-
plus-
Which makes sense.
Plus 5 feet.
So let's say
which
you have
makes
2
sense.
feet on either side.
Yeah,
You
right.
only get an extra 6 inches on either side.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
being set by the garage door.
Which makes sense.
But now the question is, with two garage doors, the most lenient interpretation of that
Just add
would,
together.
well, no, the most lenient interpretation would be from one side of one garage door to the other side of the other garage door and include the portion in the middle.
Yeah, I think-
And call that the garage door zone. I don't know that that's the best interpretation, but it's the most friendly to the applicant. So I would say the full width of the two
Yeah,
doors.
end to end.
Jam to jam would be the measurement
I would
that
say
we
so,
should
too.
base this on. Yeah.
And
So
then-
when
and then-
you make your decision, you will put that in your decision.
That we went from
That
one
we
side.
interpreted.
From you have one garage door to the other
Listen,
side.
it's a little bit pedantic, because all we're getting out of this is the percentage of variance, which is gonna be between 50 and 75%.
It's still substantial.
So we can still have the debate right now,
Right.
but,
We'll give you the
and we, just so the
detail.
application is accurate.
And then again, we also need the measurement though, of the widest part of the,
Right.
where the driveway is widest. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's not 9.6.
Which is probably going to be, probably
Probably at this
perpendicular to
inflection
this
point
edge,
right here.
right, where this comes out from the planter there.
Remember, this is all driveway now.
Yeah, and
This
that's,
is-
Dan,
so
I was
this
just gonna
is-
say, I hate to tell you, what we could really do, guys, you wanna know what we could do? Force them to update this survey to show existing period, and from there, that's gonna give us,
Well, I guess my question is does this
Give-
retaining
right,
wall?
force the survey.
I'm really confused by the gravel and the
And
retaining
while they
wall.
do that, give us the measurements on this, give us the maximum on this, force the survey, and get rid of the
What-
gravel and tell us
Actually,
what it
But
really
why
is.
force the survey? We can just go there and measure it. Or not
Yeah.
we, but
Let
someone can
me
just go
ask,
there and measure
It's
let
all
me
it.
ask a
about the
question,
record.
actually. Let me ask a question. They theoretically did this paving work and the retaining wall work all together as part of one job? Is that the story?
I think so.
So we have gravel and the retaining wall. That means that either they made a mistake writing gravel on the survey, or that retaining wall is an old retaining wall or structure.
I don't think so, because if you look at the street view, it doesn't look like there was any retaining wall in between, it's just a
But-
slope, so I don't know if this was in between.
It must have
They
been in
were-
between. You do the
in the
wall
process of
and
doing
then
it.
you pave it.
Right.
And somehow in that, in between, they got a survey done.
If we asked for it, I'm not entirely
Okay,
clear how
fair
it
enough.
came to us in general, I'm not sure if it was building permit, that's how they.
Well, here they go, they did one in 17, 17, 23.
And then it had to be one done since then. Or I mean, the
It must have been
driveway
before
work had to be
the
done
pavers
after
down,
that.
'cause the
Correct.
surveyor wouldn't have made that mistake.
Well, let me tell you something, you
Yeah,
see
I mean-
how valuable this ledger is here, telling you all these surveys that this gal did? Very simple, I subpoena all these surveys, submit them, but it's relevant.
So can we just sum this one up? Can we sum this one up? The first variance, I think we're all good with, assuming it gets filed,
Recorded.
recorded. The second variance, we're debating. The third variance.
What is the second? Just
Well, we're not
The
debating.
second is the width.
We need,
of the
we need accurate information.
We need accurate
Good.
information, but I think we know it's gonna be between 50 and 75%, so we can still
Fine.
have the argument now if we wanted to.
So what
The
did,
thir-
sorry, what do
sorry.
you need for the second variance?
The second, per the end of the staff report, the one whose verbiage wants to be massaged but is relating to the width of the driveway versus the width of the garage door.
Right, but what do you?
Measurements.
Well, 'cause look,
We want the
measurements.
measurements.
We
Including
need the-
how much it encroaches.
We need,
No,
no.
they're gonna specify what they want. For the
So-
first variance, they're looking for a
Recorded,
recording.
yeah.
For the second variance, they're looking for the width of the garage door.
Doors and
And,
the width.
and the width of the widest width of the driveway
Yeah.
forward of the house.
Right, and then.
So that, in other words, the number ratio, as we read the code, is a little different than what we're seeing in the
and that's
variance
the
as
third
requested.
variance is the width of
The
the
third
driveway.
variance is the setback. Oh, am I getting them out of order?
Which is looking for the
Yeah,
front
well, the
foundation.
third variance is,
Sorry,
again,
those are
silly.
the code sections. We're looking at the end, that's the sections in the
Yeah.
code. At the end of the variance is requested. So this one, the text needs to be fixed, and that one's actually an A. But the third one is the setback variance.
Which doesn't make any sense, because if you're encroaching over onto your neighbor's property,
Well,
obviously you.
we still need
Yeah.
to grant a variance
I
for
know.
being 0.
But if we're gonna grant
inches
the
from your
first one,
property
we would
line.
obviously grant the
Grant the
third
second
one
one.
too.
I would think so.
How could you
Not
possibly
necessarily.
grant the first one and not the third one?
It
That doesn't
would
make
be
sense.
silly to, yes.
It would be, but technically you could say no.
You could do anything, but I'm
No,
saying like,
the thing is,
logically, if you
if the
grant the first
neighbor
one.
wants to have a wall that you built on their property and is cool with that, fine. If you want to pave up close to your property line, that's kind of a different issue, but the two go hand in hand, and I personally feel if we're willing to pass the first one, we should be willing to pass the
Yes.
first.
But in the easement, they mentioned the wall and the driveway, not just the wall.
No, right, because there's driveway on that surface, but that's the portion beyond the property line that we're not addressing with the third variance.
Actually, we need to maybe inquire about the wall based on the overlappage. How could we tell?
No, it's on the neighbor's property. If they get an easement registered, we're good. Recorded, we're good. I'm not interested in debating where that wall is, really. As long as the neighbor knows where it is and says it's cool, and we say you have a right to build the thing on your.
What's the height?
Pursuant to their easement.
It was under the, it made a mention, it's under the.
Good.
Yeah. Well, otherwise, this would be a building, they would need to be filing for a building permit, they would need to be
Right.
surveying it, they would
Yeah.
need to be engineering it, yada, yada, yada.
Okay, so that's that one, so we can't make a decision on it. I mean, we could, I mean, I
The
could,
verbiage
like,
on number 2 is just misinterpreted, that's all. We'll clarify it.
Well, give us the.
And number 3 was supposed to be A, not B. Because if you read the code, only the second applies to this case because there is a garage. The third one is the alternate chunk of code that applies if there is no garage. So B is not relevant to us, if that makes sense.
So you're saying the third one should be C?
No.
It's not B,
That should be A.
that should be A.
It's the same
So it's
section
the
of
same.
code.
Oh, okay.
That 3A is, both variances 2 and 3 are variances to stipulations in 3A.
But we'll get this fixed for next time.
yeah.
All right, so how do people, let's get back to the issue at hand. The second variance, the width of the driveway being so much wider than the garage, are we cool with that or not? Because that's the real question.
That's the one that you think is bad precedence.
It's the thing that is leaving a bad taste in my mouth. The other stuff is up to the neighbor to be okay with. That's not, it's about ownership, it's not about zoning as much. in
I
my
don't know if it sets a precedence, again, because you could come back as another resident and say, I want to build a gigantic parking lot in my front yard too, and if it's going to have a negative impact on the character of the neighborhood, then we're
And
going
he
to
also doesn't
deny
have an
it.
easement that allows you to get that wide.
Well, you could, I mean, but if your driveway was right in the middle of your property, you could do it
True.
So
without
is the
it.
fact that this isn't having a negative impact because people like the aesthetics,
Mhm.
or because it's screened by vegetation,
Mhm.
or because it has been being used that way for quite some time? And
All
it's-
the
All of-
above,
all of the above.
all the above.
Until they go to sell and they've just both tremendously devalued
All right,
their homes.
I'm inclined, whether
Well, no.
sound,
Not necessarily.
it,
If the house that has the easement isn't gonna be devalued.
no, if they do their paperwork right, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the next applicant on some other property that comes and says, well, I want a driveway
easement.
like
Watch out.
75%
I know,
wider
but,
than my
oh, you mean
garage.
if those
Yeah.
other
So I can
people
park my
sell their,
car.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
no, like,
Um,
I was saying the guy that received the easement.
I don't know.
That's what I was saying.
Follow you guys, one conversation at a time, I
All
gotta
right.
be able to follow you.
Sorry.
So
Anyway,
we're talking about the second variance, again, going how the driveway's wider than and the spirit of, in the sense where we don't want people building parking lots in their front yard, right?
By agreement.
But, so we're saying, okay, the fact that it's substantial, let's put that aside. I think we could agree whether it's 50% or 75%, it's substantial.
Substantial.
Right? Is that enough? Is the substantialness of it enough for us to deny it?
It would be if we wanted to.
If we
I think
wanted
we can approve it or deny it. I'm just trying to figure out what the explanation is that we can best write if we approve it
Mhm.
to make sure as much as possible that we're not setting bad precedent.
Yeah.
That's all.
I would
How
say-
will you make
And
it pertain to just to this house?
Yeah, and I think we've listed a few ideas. None of them feels really ironclad, but together maybe they're enough. I think we should consider it while we wait this other information. But that's, I'm just, and maybe, if it's still sticking bad in my gut, I'm a vote against, but it's still,
Yeah.
you guys would do what you want.
Yeah, we don't have to be unanimous. And I would also say,
Yeah.
like, if someone else came and they wanted to make their driveway 50% larger, and it was gonna, again, not cause a negative impact on the character of the neighborhood, and it's gonna look beautiful, like, maybe we would say, yeah, you go ahead and do it too then.
Right, I mean,
And then if everyone does that in the entire village, I mean, like,
yeah, it's, anyway, that's where I am on that variance. I think 1 and 3 I'm fine with. 2 is like leaving a slight bad taste in my mouth, but I'm still on the fence.
okay.
All right.
When you looked at it, what did you think of it initially? Did
I
you say,
thought
oh
it
my
was-
God, there's a
I thought it was
parking
done
lot?
very nicely, but it also seemed unusual because you don't see that kind of use of a front yard in this village,
Mhm.
because apparently, like, like Gerard, I hadn't really looked at the driveway code much before either. It didn't
Mhm.
stick in
Yeah.
my mind the details of this drive,
Yeah.
the width of the door, but it also isn't something that you see. But then again, there are other cases where I think there was a forgiveness, not permission, for just down the street on Main Street, someone who did a whole loop driveway in their front yard,
Mhm.
got a stop work order, came for a variance, and I don't remember the details of it, but I think
I
they
remember
got
that it was a greenhouse, it's now white.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on Main Street, yeah.
well,
Yeah, and he did a
so-
lot in the front he
The
did a
one
lot
that
of.
So maybe the precedent is you gotta come, ask for permission, and do a good job, and stipulate to whatever aesthetic considerations the board wants to put on it, but there are certain situations where it's appropriate to have a little bit more paved space in your front yard than the code will ask for. Maybe that's where we've essentially walked the village.
Well, I would
code.
also say, it's true, because if you were right on Main Street, high traffic area, right, and now you're gonna and you're right on the street, and now you're gonna build this gigantic driveway, that's gonna have a negative character. or
Yeah.
Well, no, he did
negative
a loop
character.
because it was easier to
I'm
get
just saying,
in and
yeah,
out.
saying yeah.
I mean, there's a reason the code doesn't allow it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And in RO, what it's saying is no parking lots in the front forward of the structure either, right? Which driveways and parking lots, because it's a semi-commercial district in a way.
Right.
More commercial under the old code. They actually ratcheted it back. You can drive up there and see all these buildings that are purely commercial that were built under the old code and got so big and ugly and tearing down old homes that they changed the code
Hmm.
to kind of try to keep some of the character of Main Street
Yeah.
before it all disappeared. But that's what the code says today.
The one that we granted with the emergency, where their wall was failing,
Mhm.
not too long ago.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ten-
Over here.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, it was just that it was being built, stop work order, it was an emergency.
See, yeah.
But was it encroaching? It required
It was a setback.
it was a setback,
Yeah.
but there was no spillage, right, onto the.
No,
No.
no,
okay.
it was,
No,
it
there
was
was
in,
not.
I think it was like a foot away,
Okay.
I think it's close as
Yeah.
one. It was very close.
All right. I'm willing to officially ask these questions and put this to bed in the interest of letting everybody
And we have
go home.
62 days to actually.
We do, and
vote.
I think we'll be able to resolve both of these next time if we can get the answers to our questions. So the questions are, we've clarified, the width of the garage doors together, jam to jam.
Yeah.
The width of the widest part of the driveway forward of the house and
Yep.
garage. And the recording of
Yes.
the easement
That's
at
the most
county.
important thing to
Yes.
me.
And those three things are our pending things here, and let's get to the other applications.
I have a question for you
request.
about this, one last thing.
Yeah.
How do you propose that they go out and acquire this information? Do you want our building people to go out and
Yeah.
measure, or, very simply.
Why are you so hung up on this?
Because you should be providing us with as reflected built survey.
Every
I'm
time?
gonna say no.
Every time.
I think you're causing an unnecessary expense for the homeowner.
Yeah.
Yes.
That in the beginning.
Huh?
We should have told them that they would have needed to have an as-built survey in the beginning. We
Yes.
gotta tell them at the tail
If it's
end of their
existing,
review.
you should be submitting to us an as-built.
Okay, there's a lot of time, it's,
Point blank, you go to Brookhaven, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, you better go get it.
that's not entirely true.
As-built, if
Pretty-
it's existing.
Pretty much, but they're not applying for a building permit.
But the problem is here is that now this is in the record, it's a part of the application, and there is some discrepancy. Gravel, but what's this? You're asking for guess what, survey can go back?
No. Actually, I have to say, in this particular case, if I were the building department kicking this for an area variance, I would probably want to make sure that the survey was current. It is very recent.
And because you're
essentially-
encroaching, and because you're on another
Yes,
lot, that's
but-
another reason.
But I believe that because the retaining wall is there, what we have is a current survey from right before those pavers went in, and I'm fine with it.
Even more because of the encroachment on the other lot, I would want one too, because we, the village,
No, but that's not our purview. We are getting, listen, we're getting them and the other neighbors and the easement and Suffolk County to resolve that property line issue. Anything that happens past that property line, I do not care. That is not what we're judging from a spatial standpoint.
And really, we're just talking about the material. Is it paver or
Yeah,
is it
we're just
gravel?
talking about material.
I don't, that has no impact on
Another issue.
Please.
Uh-oh.
It's the day of fun complications.
So I looked up the letter from the building inspector, just to make sure that, of what the variances were noted. I did note a paragraph at the bottom that I was told that the retaining wall was 2 feet in height. If it's 2 feet or less, it does not need a permit. The application for denial notes a retaining wall that might be higher than 2 feet, in which case that might also need another variance. For some strange reason, the building inspector noted that it may be noted that the retaining wall and driveway will require a building permit. However, the portion of the wall that is not on your parcel will need to be addressed by the abutting property owner under a separate permit, providing that the ZBA grants relief for the offending items listed above.
Oh my gosh, imagine that wall is higher and requires, and now you have the easement on somebody else's land, but not only just the being there, but now you've got a building height. This is.
Question.
Survey.
Can you apply for?
Survey. Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry, Andrew.
Can you apply for a building permit? One building permit on multiple separately owned parcels of land?
No.
Okay, that's what that just said, right? So then they need to do that, but that has nothing to do with us.
No, I just want you guys to be aware that
So we could grant a
that might
variance.
also be an
We
issue.
can grant required variances, which have nothing to do with the height of that wall.
And then they're gonna go ahead.
And then they're gonna say, by the way, you also need a building permit, and so does your neighbor.
Yep.
Well, that's the
It
thing, I
might
don't
be
know.
nice to let the neighbor know that before they start
So this
recording
was
this.
Yeah, but they
sent
could
to-
probably pay for
This
the
was
ties
sent
and
to the
expense.
homeowner. So,
Okay.
I think the intention was for,
To get the
the
variance
homeowner
first.
was to let his neighbor know that it's technically the wall that's on his property,
Yeah.
not necessarily the wall that's on
Well,
this property.
Right, in order to apply for a building permit on somebody else's property, all you need is their signature giving you permission to do so. You can pay the fee, you can be the
Oh,
applicant.
I'm sure, but
you
they're
can do
not
the
going
drawings.
to
Right,
do
so.
that, most likely.
What do you, sorry, what?
I don't think that this property owner would,
The applicant.
or any
in
property
question.
owner wouldn't want to apply for a building permit on their neighbor's property. I think that's where the issue is, that we don't have a building permit for the retaining wall that's technically on the neighbor's property.
I think they're going to.
Well, they
I
would
think-
have to.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but the person who owns the house would probably pay for everything, apply for
they
it, and pay
should.
for it.
We
Yeah.
haven't gotten
No,
a building permit
but-
for it.
But that's what I'm
why
saying, like, they could literally be the applicant,
Right.
pay the fee, do
Yeah.
all the drawings,
Mhm.
do all the work. All they need is the owner affidavit that says you may
Right.
do this on my
Like,
property
you can't
with
expect-
my
Right.
permission.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
you would
And-
never expect that owner to.
No,
Yeah.
but good to make sure that the neighbor knows that that's coming down the pike before they record their easement.
Right, because the easement is the neighbor allowing them to have the wall on their property.
But the neighbor is also,
But
as
the
a
neighbor-
part of that, going to have to file for a building
Right.
permit, or allow them, sign off on building permit being filed on their
I
property.
think you would ask us to measure the height of the wall too, all around.
Yes.
Yeah.
On both properties.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more that we measure, the more that we're vulnerable. So why don't we just have this, at least some equivalent here, update our survey, provide us the heights, provide us the distance, so that when we go, what's going on, we go, this is who measured
You
it for
can get an
you."
updated survey.
Thanks.
So listen, I hear what you're saying,
Thanks,
Antonio. We could do it without, it's not, I would leave it up to the building department and say that one recommended way of getting that information would be to
Yeah.
request an
To
updated
get it.
survey.
And just have her do a couple
But
things,
it's-
give us a line here for the max.
But I'm
give us
gonna
this.
leave it up to the building department to make that determination, all right? If they send us back this survey and a few measurements they took, I'm fine with that, okay?
Okay.
All right.
But, yeah, that sounds
So
fair enough.
we're just
That
asking.
easement
we-
should be
Say-
recorded with that survey.
Probably should.
Probably,
right.
you're right.
Thank you.
That
If I was that neighbor, I wouldn't want that survey
Actually-
recorded with that easement.
Actually, that's true, because they're getting an easement for the driveway as well, and the driveway's not on, the pavement's not on the survey.
Just
that
tell
they're
me I'm
submitting
right,
with the
Andrew, and we
easement.
can go home, okay?
You got your pound of flesh this
Thank
time.
you.
Can we move on to the other application?
Yes, we're done. Okay.
I'm
So you're
still-
saying that they should get an updated survey?
If I were that neighbor, I would want one. I'm still not officially gonna tell the building department what to ask of the applicant.
And probably file it with the
With
easement,
the
so.
easement, but that's none of our business, that's it.
All right.
Somebody calls me up and said, yeah, I think so. All right, what are we doing, 112?
Except we're not.
Oh, no,
right?
right.
I mean, we wanna make sure we're asking all the relevant questions, but, all right.
I mean, is anyone still debating that this is not an active use structure? I mean, like,
Inside there, that's up for the building department to determine. There was an allocation made.
no, what I'm saying is the garage is passive use.
Are you? Because at the end, he tossed in that it wasn't.
No,
He
did.
didn't, he
No,
wasn't that specific.
He said it was for storage.
No, the neighbor.
Oh, yeah, but I can,
Right, but that's up to the building department to determine. I'm not
Exactly.
interested in calling anybody a liar. I'm interested
Plus,
in
also,
looking
like,
at the application. in
if the
front of
homeowner tells us it's gonna be used for storage and then it's not used for storage,
That's a violation.
That's somebody else's problem, not our
Right,
problem.
exact, correct.
But the homeowner himself made it pretty clear that he'll be using the covered portion as active use.
Yes, but a pergola is active use.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and I guess what's really weird to me
Mhm.
is that a thing that would have been allowed, they made a code change to make something easier, more lenient.
Yep.
That was all of the discussion around the time of adding the portion to the code around active use, accessory uses. And what we've discovered is that because of the ambiguity around unenclosed structures and their interpretation, their possible interpretation as active uses,
Mhm.
we've actually made something which would have been allowed before,
Yeah.
not allowed by the change in code.
Right.
I don't think that was the intent of the code, and so I'm asking whether instead of doing a sort of blind letter of the law, should we be simply saying that an unenclosed thing is not what was meant by an active accessory use? Because you can use your yard. You can play music, you can have a barbecue, you can put a chair anywhere you damn want. And in fact, they were sitting on the other side of the fence having dinner when the fire happened, which means they're using their yard right up to the fence.
And they said they had a porch with an
Well,
overhang.
I'm not even getting into that. It feels to me like a natural way to use your yard that's different than building a pool hall, pool house, she shed, man cave, bar building.
Yes.
Right.
But a pergola is active use under the current code.
Only if you feel like interpreting it that way, and it wouldn't
And the
have,
garage
it
is
would,
passive.
wait, but it wouldn't
Under the
have
code.
been before they made this code change. So before they made this code change, you couldn't make a man cave. But you could make a pergola 5 feet from the property line.
Mhm.
Now they make this change to say you can make a man cave,
It's got 10 feet.
but now your pergola must be 10 feet from the property line.
Right.
That I don't think was the intent of the code. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe.
So you want somebody to look up the history of the code to find out how it should
Well,
be?
we know the history. We were all here. It was built, there were hearings about it.
I think the only thing I would add to that is that I would think that the active use is also added to it. Granted, it doesn't say it in the code, but all of the structures, because it's closed, you can use it year round. This, you wouldn't be able to use year round. Second, it's raining or storming or snowing, you're not outside there. It's not a use that could be active year round, so it's because it's only seasonal? Does that help it?
It's a
more
good question.
passive,
And
or-
that-
I mean,
in
you
the
could-
code, all the examples they provide of active use structures are
Are enclosed.
enclosed.
Yes.
Right.
It would have been great if they would have said, and pergolas.
Or not, actually.
Or
Just say,
not.
or just clarify that active use applies to enclosed structures and actively used exterior structures like pergolas are still under the old. Essentially, the accessory structure and the definition of a structure is very ambiguous in the code, and
Yes.
we're running up against one of the gray areas pretty hard right now.
But is it our place to interpret?
But can't-
Well, but this is,
We're being told it's an active use structure.
but that's where I would like the building department to take a look at our question and say, we would like to give them the option to ask us for a code interpretation instead of asking us for a variance.
Yep.
I'd rather not say yes or no to the 7-foot setback on an active accessory structure. I'd rather have them look again and either say, we agree with your objection, we've reinterpreted it, this case doesn't need to be dealt with. Or, we're not sure about the interpretation, ZBA, would you please clarify whether an exterior structure counts as an
And then-
active
and then we can
accessory
make the
structure?
decision.
And we could make that decision and say it's ambiguous enough in the intent. I would argue if they did that, if they took us up on changing the character of the ask, I would argue that, that the code is ambiguous enough, the tie goes to the runner, it seems to object to the intent, or to the applicant. It seems to conflict with what I believe the intent of that portion of the code is. I would say that's not an active accessory structure. And if the Board of Trustees disagrees with my interpretation, it's free to them to clarify the code moving forward, which is always the case whenever we do a code clarification. Board doesn't like it, fix it.
So in essence, what
Right.
we're asking for is we want
Them to
the building department to weigh in on why they classified it as an active use.
And would they consider either changing their mind or asking the board, upon reconsideration of the fact that this is not an enclosed structure, would they consider, reconsider the application, either withdrawing the requirement for it or asking the board for a clarification as a preamble?
That would be the
We might
easiest.
find that they
Ask
say,
for
listen, we always
clarification.
classify these types of things as active
But
use.
they didn't they didn't even ask the question when the application first went in, and that's the part where I feel like the homeowner really got burned.
Yeah, of course.
They drew a thing, and then they actually changed it based upon a conversation with the guy, and at no time did they lie about what they, or change their mind in my hearing of the story about what they were planning on using that thing for, and now all of a sudden they have something in violation and they're paying for a variance that they might not get, and, or having to lie about, or change what the use is, or modify the building. Right, that feels like a mess up in the department, not a mess up on their part.
Except
And
that area's all storage now, you just took down the soffit.
just if it were storage, it wouldn't help. I
Great
see where you're
question.
going with that, but it's only storage. It's not, that's not sufficient to win the argument. You were creative though. But
I think the
if I said I'm
easiest
gonna
way
keep
is
my- if I
to
said I'm gonna
change
keep my
the
garbage cans
ask
under
and
there,
ask
then-
us for an interpretation, and we could argue that out and
Right.
say if they don't like it, they can.
Or at the very least, maybe the applicant shouldn't pay for the variance application. I don't know. If that,
Well,
this
that
one
would
fe-
happen,
I
right,
would
if
like to
we-
get the TikTok and see if his story checks out, because it feels like he got burned on the order of operations
Well, yeah.
there.
Plus, he
Well, I
already-
think
he
we
already
already
made a change
determined
to
that he got,
meet
that we made the mistake, that's why we were saying we
Well,
wouldn't.
that's why I'm not sure if it was that he gave the application, we told him we need to have at least a 5-foot setback, assuming that it was just an extension of the garage, passive use. But maybe it was in a conversation where he said, I can't wait to hang out under here, that then the building inspector was like, oh, wait, no, that's active now, that requires, that's why I'm just not sure,
But it,
that's what I
yeah,
assumed
and
it
it's
was.
such a
but
great, I'd love to
I'm not
hear if
sure.
that's actually how it
Meanwhile,
happened.
we're letting, you know, the signs
If that's
say
how it
that
happened,
the
it
road
feels
is
like
closed.
something that should have been asked as a covered exterior space that was it just said, if the building application just says covered exterior space, and there were no questions asked, and a permit was granted, I feel like,
I think in the building
it-
permit, it just said overhang.
It does. I mean,
That's what
there
it
you
was
go.
noted
I mean,
as.
even-
There you go.
even on-
Assuming it's an overhang, that's, could just be an extension of a passive
It
use.
could be, but if the building department's gonna turn around and say, because you put a chair under there, you have to modify your building, that could have, should have been asked ahead of time, and I also think it's such a gray interpretation of the
That also
code.
gets weird, we can't ask everyone when you're building
Yeah, what are you
something,
gonna use it for?
You
What are you doing
you
this?
absolutely can, if it's gonna, if the granting or denial, the need for a variance or not is gonna hinge upon that decision. We get questions all the time back as applicants about our applications to clarify whether they're to code or not, or whether they need to be modified. In fact, he had it modified, there was a whole conversation
Well,
about
cause he
that.
had it in line with the garage, and that would have been the 3 feet,
I
you
am-
need at least the 5.
I am confused why the 4-foot extension on the other side wasn't required to set back to meet the 5-foot either. But don't go there. I also don't think,
Because it
if it,
existed.
under the same rationale, I don't think it necessarily would have had to, although it's clearly different than the garage, so maybe. Point being, he built it more than 5 feet as he was asked to,
Right.
and never lied about what he was gonna do under there.
Like, he made a good faith effort
And it's,
to meet
and
the
it's
code.
very
Yeah.
gray area whether it should even be called an active accessory structure to begin with. It just feels not right, and I'd rather not grant it, because I don't think it needs it. I don't think it needs a variance. I don't wanna say yes to an active use variance because I don't think it needs an
How do we,
active
how do
use
we
variance.
get there?
Can we ask the building department for an explanation of the order of operations for the issuance, for the conversation with the applicant, the approval of a design, and the subsequent requirement of a variance?
So you want a timeline, right?
So that's the timeline of how that went down, and the logic behind it, right? And the second one was clarity on how and why this is definitely considered an active use structure. And thirdly, if the building department would consider adding a part to the application that asks the ZBA for a code clarification as to whether this is an active use accessory structure. And if yes, then the variance that's being asked for would come into play, and if no, then the application is done.
For that part though,
Yeah.
because you'd be adding onto the application, that would need re-advertisement, right? Because you're adding to the application what's
That
being asked.
a lawyer would need to see whether we can essentially.
You could amend it,
We're
but
trying.
it'd be,
We're
if you
trying to.
amend it, it needs to have a new advertisement, because if someone's assuming that they're only coming for the one variance.
That's a really good
That's
point.
one thing, but now that they can also speak on the interpretation, and they can give, well, I think this is an active, I think this is passive.
That's a pretty good argument why.
But-
Well,
That's why
hang
it
on.
might need to be
That's-
re-advertised.
That's a really good argument why we can't just call an audible and turn an area variance request into a code interpretation request, which is what we were asking before the meeting.
Right. Yeah.
Can we just reinterpret the question? No, because it's improperly advertised. That's totally.
Possibly, I would maybe ask Jim Burke that.
It feels
different than
wrong.
what was
The
advertised.
application scope is not framed correctly. It's not.
Yeah, it wasn't
Right,
correct.
right.
It's not even the same kind of
Right.
action, yeah.
But it was framed correctly when it came to you.
No.
No, because we have to determine something that's outside of the universe in the application
Yeah.
before we can even
The
decide.
definition of active and passive.
We're questioning the premise of the
Yeah, and it's
application.
citing two different parts of code. So
Yeah.
it would be citing the part
Yeah.
of code
You
that
see?
has the setback,
Yeah.
and it'd be citing the part of code that
Right,
defines.
and we would be the ones re-advertising it too. Like, you can't.
Yeah, we would
Right,
have
it would
to,
be
well,
on- it would be.
we had said that we would pick up if it needed to be re-advertised, we'd pick up the cost.
Well, look, at a
What's the
certain
hope?
point, the jury gets asked the question that the jury gets asked. And at the end of the day, if they don't like the premise of the question, they can just, it's like jury nullification. We would just give them the variance and then send a letter to the Board of Trustees that says, yo, you might want to reinterpret this code. Or
Yeah.
revisit this
Yeah,
code
yeah.
because we don't actually think that the variance that we granted was required, and that's why we granted it.
Right.
Because we don't think this is an active accessory
But- and I
structure.
know we
But I
keep-
hate muddying the waters that way because it's weird precedent.
I feel like we read the active statute,
Yeah.
portions very thoroughly and literal and whatnot, but right below it is the passive one. I just want to like.
Which is
say-
also all interior stuff.
No, but hold on, even worse than that, it's got a big fat word called garage on
Yeah.
it. Okay?
Well, no,
It's
this,
just like-
this application
All
is,
right.
okay, we haven't even gotten to this.
Yeah.
Antonio, we haven't even gotten to this confusion. In order to send us this application at all, the building department had to decide that the garage is passive, but this adjoining on
Right.
the
They
garage
had to
is
sever
active,
them.
as if they are two separate structures, which they are not.
And hence the door.
Well, leave the
Remember
door
the door?
alone.
Remember the door that I pointed to?
But even the ability to do that is weird to me. I wouldn't have imagined as an applicant that I could go and say, here's a structure, but it's actually two structures. Because the second
Right.
they touch, it becomes one structure. Like,
Right.
if you stuck this awning on the back of the house, it would be part of the principal structure, and it would be active by definition.
Right.
And it would need to meet all of the primary structure setbacks.
If the structure
Whereas
is
the
passive
second
but
a
the
garage
code, it
touches,
needs
it's an
an
adjoining
active-
garage, it needs to meet the active
And
structure,
right.
even if it's a garage.
Convergence.
You can't say it's a garage, therefore it can be closer to the property line because a freestanding garage can be. If it's adjoined to the house, it is part of the principal structure. So the severing of this structure is really
Right.
weird to me too.
Very
We haven't even gone there.
Perfect. I got my point across.
Anyway,
Garage.
let me use the restroom. Are we?
I think
We're good.
yeah,
Wow.
These are both going on August.
yeah.
Yes. Want me to go on vacation?
No, everybody better still be here.
Actually, I am gonna be out.
We can't bring
The
people on the meeting.
August 13th to the 20th.
Oh, you'll be back just in time for the.
That's how I planned it.
Rethink that, Dan.
Yeah.
A procedural, general question. You guys automatically pull FOIL when the application is on your own recognizance, yes?
Yes.
I would hope you do. You would want to know what the patient's prior
Usually,
blood
they're
work is.
supposed to submit,
Yeah, well,
but we
what I
don't
was
have
trying
to.
to get across, I'm sorry, we're done, thank you so much. What I was trying to get across to this gentleman here
Do
today.
you need to close it? Is that what that motion is?
Oh, yeah.
No, there's no, because we just.
No, we closed.
Yeah, we
Oh,
closed
no,
it.
Yeah.
I wasn't
The
sure
work
if it needs-
session
say
so
close
that
the
they can
hearing,
turn
yeah.
off the live stream.
Yeah.
No, he turned, yeah, we're good.